Chapter 180. For, even if I forget the whole world, I will not forget you, with my blood, mend this man's early demise. With my soul, allow this man to live. With a century's cultivation and my flesh offered up in sacrifice, let my child's memories be sealed, growth halted, reincarnated into a new life, born into another world, happy and safe, a life without worry. The very instant her voice fell, the woman spread her arms wide open, her beautiful neck lifted slightly. The blood-colored clothes billowed out like she was standing under strong winds, looking like a phoenix weeping out blood, who at the moment just before death claimed it, was showing off its most resplendent beauty. There was a secret forbidden technique known to exist among the ancient techniques that were taboo, where as long as one was sincere and determined enough, they could come to possess great power, and have the ability to defy the heavens by changing one's fate, where nothing was impossible for them. But people who executed that forbidden technique had to pay a great price. They would not come to a good end. Has Qing Lan Fei lost her mind? Does she know what she is doing at all? Qing Luo Yen shook her head in disbelief. Was she wrong? The two of them were willing to do things for each other to such an unbelievably far extent. It seems like there are really some things that are more important than one's own life. And that is love. The one thing that had gotten countless smitten men and women heartbroken and so overcome with grief since the beginning of time, that was much more venomous than the greatest poison there was. The light faded away and the flawlessly beautiful woman fell to the ground like all her strength had been drained out of her in an instant, but she endured the agonizing pain wrecking at her body as she dragged herself forward, to lean into the man's embrace, a thin trickle of blood spilling out from the corner of her mouth. I'm sorry, my love. How can I possibly leave you all alone in that cold, desolate place? Jingyu, forgive me for my selfishness. I would rather see you continue to live in pain than to see you die right before my eyes, as that will really just be too cruel to me. If I am still able to come back, can we then be together forever? Many translucent shadows were flying out from her body. Those were her soul's essence leaving from her body. This was the price she had to pay for using the forbidden technique, and very soon. All her blood will bleed out of her, and all her cultivation will be lost, to turn into a good-for-nothing, slowing dying away. But, she was not regretting it at all. That was right where her memory stopped. Qing Lan Fei opened her eyes slowly, and looked at the man who lay there upon the ice bed with his eyes closed, who seemed like he was such a quiet gentleman as he slept, before she suddenly smiled. Mo Jingyu. He is still alive. He had really resurrected. Despite the fact that he was not showing any response at that moment, but he was still breathing. And that meant that the day would come when he would wake up again. There was no way of knowing just how severe his injuries had been, for him to have slept for an entire 100 years without waking. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qing Lan Fei leaned against his chest, to feel that almost imperceptible heartbeat, and she had never felt so at ease. Finally. Seeing you again. Jingyu, no matter how many years my mind had been clouded and confused, at the first moment that I saw you, I am suddenly able to recall everything. That peaceful quiet did not last for long, when the tightly shut doors were suddenly crashed wide open, and the sounds of many footsteps came surging in. Chapter 181. 1. Fainted for no reason upon seeing the red-clothed woman standing beside the ice bed, everyone's eyes widened in shock. Who is this woman? They have never seen her before. This is a place where access is restricted and she dares to come in here. Isn't she afraid that she'll be killed? In addition to that, does she know who that man lying on that bed is? To think that she dares to lean so intimately on him, what audacity. Hearing the commotion, Qing Lan Fei slowly lifted her head and looked towards the door. When her flawlessly beautiful countenance was revealed, everyone was mesmerized, falling in a daze, thinking that they had seen a fairy. It was said throughout the world that the barbarians looked exceptionally ugly, walking beasts with human faces, but that was only because the barbarians were highly reclusive, and the rumors just got out of hand being told and retold by people. Instead, no one in the barbarian tribe was in fact exceptionally ugly looking, the worst one among them considered to be of average looks. But there was no lack of people with outstanding looks, and one would know just by looking at the man lying there on the ice bed. That man was the most beautiful person in the barbarian tribe, and though he was male, his looks were more attractive than any of their women, and that was how his reputation came about. Right before their eyes now, the woman's looks were not inferior to that man's in the slightest, dressed in a suit of flaming red, stunning like the proud sun and a cold arrogant air surrounding her. She looked like a goddess descended from the 9 heavens, and all of them could not take their eyes off her. In contrast to the astoundment everyone was showing, the face of the middle-aged man leading them had instead stiffened, seemingly recalling something in his mind before he opened his mouth to say incredulously, "Qing Lan Fei, you witch. You are still alive." Qing Lan Fei was taken aback a moment, feeling puzzled that the man was able to recognize her, though she found him a little familiar looking. But before she could recall, the middle-aged man's face turned dark as he said in a sharp tone. "It's not enough that you caused him to be in this state, you dare to pursue him all the way here to our barbarian tribe? You refuse the take-easy path in heaven and choose to barge your way straight into hell. Guards! Capture her and throw her into the ice dungeon." Before anyone could ascertain the identity of the incredibly beautiful woman, they suddenly heard the chieftain's orders. They snapped out of their daze in surprise, and not daring to defy the chieftain's orders, they all went forward to catch her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. They had merely gone a few steps closer and had not even struck a single blow when they found themselves being flung out by a bright chilly flare of light. Everyone was caught off guard and were thrown a far distance away, their bodies crashing heavily to the cold hard floor as they gasped and grimaced in pain. What just happened? Qing Lan Fei was equally surprised by that, and her beautiful eyes flared slightly, wondering what had happened as well. She saw the middle-aged man's face turn an uglier shade, and he had just leaned his body forward a little when he was assaulted by the same bright light. Fortunately he was able to dodge quickly, or he would have ended up just like the others, flung out by the invisible force embarrassingly, where he would have then relinquished his position as the chieftain from shame. Chapter 181. 2. Fainted for no reason. Damn you, Mo Jingyu, you're already lying there half dead and you still want to protect that witch? You deserve to lie there for 100 years. The middle-aged man then flicked his sleeves angrily before he turned to leave. Everyone else exchanged glances, looking at each other for a moment before they followed the man out. Someone could be heard asking softly, "Chieftain, what do we do with that woman in there? Do we still need to lock her up in the ice dungeon?" The middle-aged man's infuriated voice was then heard in response, "Lock what up? Didn't you see how all those useless good-for-nothings were unable to even get close at all? Are you going to lock yourself up?" Everyone did not know what to say. Why did the chieftain call them useless good-for-nothings? It looked like you were not able to get close to the woman yourself, isn't it? Are you also a useless good-for-nothing? You're the man. You're the chieftain, so anything you say will be right. Throwing such a tantrum here will only confuse everyone further, you know. In just a while, the place was suddenly completely clear of people. Qing Lan Fei turned herself back around, her eyes lowering down to look at the man lying on the ice bed, her slender hand holding onto his. But it wasn't like what happened the first time she touched him earlier. Unexpectedly, there was no resistance or retaliation from him this time. Besides feeling that the temperature of his hand was a little low, his hand felt rather soft to the touch. "Jingyu, you are actually able to hear what I am saying, can't you? Let it be my turn this time to accompany you, all right? I'll wait till you wake up, so that you'll be able to see me in the first instance. That will make you happy, wouldn't it?" Her voice had just fallen and she did not know whether she was mistaken when she suddenly felt the hand held in her palm twitch slightly. The endless darkness in Qing Yu's previous life had trained her to be an early riser. No matter how late she went to bed, she would always wake up just when the sun was rising, and would not be able to go back to sleep. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU having her stay over in the gathered cloud loft for 2 days, Lu Junyao had come to discover that the lass woke up very early. But for today, it was already mid-morning and he still did not hear any sound coming out from her room. Qin Yu had picked a room further inside on the second floor which was a little more quiet. Lu Junyao's room was on the 3rd floor and he did not see any signs of Qin Yu's presence when he came down. His eyebrow arched up as he asked, "The little fox went out. I did not see her. Could she have overslept?" Bai Zhiyan said with a spring roll stuffed in his mouth, the words sounding rather muffled. He then raised his voice to call out, "Lian Ji, go to the last room and see if she has woken up." Hearing that, Lian Ji acknowledged and went up the stairs. But very soon, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard above and Lian Ji's voice sounded a little flustered as it rang out. "My lord, something isn't right with the young lady. There is no response no matter how I call out to her." Lu Junyao immediately got up and went upstairs, while Bai Zhiyan quickly swallowed the food in his mouth before he went following right behind. Chapter 181. 3. Fainted for no reason upon the mattress, the young lady lay with her hands crossed over her abdomen. She looked like she was peacefully asleep and there was even a faint smile at the ends of her lips, seeming to be having a nice dream. If one were to disregard her unusually pale complexion, they might really think that she was just sleeping. Lu Junyao's gaze turned dark as he walked over to the side of the bed. His footsteps were rather heavy but the young lady did not seem to have noticed anything. She was usually highly alert and her senses sharp, able to maintain a certain level of consciousness at all times, never sleeping so deeply like this. She was only wearing a thin inner robe under the blanket but in those circumstances, modesty wasn't really that big a priority in their minds. Lu Junyao pulled the blanket a little lower, and pressed his finger against the young lady's neck. It was icy cold to the touch and his face creased up. He then checked her hand and it was just as chilly. "What's wrong with the little lass?" Bai Zhiyan asked as he walked in and saw the ominous look on Lu Junyao's face. Lu Junyao made way for the man, his brows furrowed as he said, "Have a look at her. I am unable to feel any pulse." Hearing that, Bai Zhiyan immediately shed away his languid demeanor and went to sit down by the bed. He placed his fingers on the young lady's wrist and sent his consciousness out to probe deeper. It was as if he had gone into lands filled with ice and snow, where everything was blindingly white, unable to detect any signs of life. The lass. Bai Zhiyan's eyes widened in shock. Her body is completely frozen inside. Lu Junyao's eyes sank. How did it happen? I do not know. But judging from the extent of the freeze that has overtaken her body, it must have been 8 hours at least. I think even she had not noticed it herself, or the expression on her face would not look so peaceful. It had probably started while she was in her dreams and it struck her so fast and hard that she did not notice a single thing. If she does not wake up within these 24s, then I fear she will never ever wake up again. Bai Zhiyan said worriedly, his heart heavy. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU seeing Lu Junyao silent without a single word coming out from him and feeling the low oppressive aura emanating from his body, Bai Zhiyan hesitated a moment before he decided to still say it, "But we do not even know what the cause of it is at all, so I really do not know how to deal with this at all." Just as the air was growing more oppressive, a faint golden glow suddenly appeared around Qin Yu's body, like it was trapped inside and was struggling very hard to break out. The golden glow then grew stronger and more intense, before surging out from her body, to form up into the shape of a human figure. Golden-haired and dressed in gold, an outstandingly handsome tall youth suddenly appeared in the room. The other 2 men looked at him warily, and Lu Junyao's eyes glinted sharply, like something was surging and stirring up inside. The murder in his eyes was clear to see, so how could Zhang Mai possibly not notice it? He immediately opened his mouth to proclaim, Let me say I'm a friend and not a foe, before I come to be harmed by mistake. Although he has already regained his powers to its previous peak, the man right before him looks like he had some depth as well. Moreover, he is a friend of the mistress, so he really did not want to get into a fight here. Chapter 181. 4. Fainted for no reason by Ji Yan stared with a slightly confused look at the strange-looking youth before him. You are not human. Zhang Mai said smilingly, his eyes curved up to resemble two crescents. That's right, I am my mistress' weapon spirit. A weapon spirit. Something that only the most mighty of people from a realm like Cloud Heaven were qualified to possess. A spirit consciousness that is born only when a spirit artifact advances in level till it reaches the peak of its power, gaining the ability to assume a human form, and to attain the boundless intelligence a human possesses. All in all, a weapon spirit is a creature of heaven-defying power, equivalent to a pugilist hiding a great and powerful move, where even when its master was injured, it would be able to deal a fatal blow to the enemy at the most critical juncture, catching people completely off guard. The golden-haired youth looked at the young lady lying on the bed who had fallen into a very deep sleep. He then sighed softly before turning his gaze to look at Lu Junyao, his tone serious as he said, "Only you can save my mistress now. What has happened to her?" Lu Junyao immediately asked, seeing that the youth seemed to know something about the situation. She was fine the past 2 days and did not show any strange signs. Why has she suddenly become like this overnight? It probably has something to do with mistress' birth heritage. Her body has always been bound and shackled by a power in her blood, the body used as a medium, to sustain another person's life. Now that the other person's condition is slowly improving, the backlash is being inflicted upon my mistress' body in full. When he spoke of that, Zhang Mai's face could not help but turn dark. It is said that a malevolent tiger would not eat its young, and it can often be seen just how much more venomous humans are compared to beasts. Do they not know that their child would not be able to live by doing that? Hearing that, Lu Junyao's eyes flashed. Those words had painted such a clear picture, how could he possibly not know what it meant? It was surely done by Aunt Lan's hand, all to save the man who had already breathed his last. How big a price did she pay? Not only did she give up 100 years of cultivation in her own flesh body, even her own child's resurrection had been a tool used to revive that man. It was then that he felt resentment towards this respected elder for the first time. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU especially when he saw that beautiful and always highly lively little figure lying lifelessly before his eyes, who could possibly never wake up from her sleep to pass away quietly in her dreams, he just could not remain calm. How could such a bright and exuberant young life like this be allowed to disappear just like that? The moment that thought came into his mind, Lu Junyao's heart became depressed and sad, feeling highly uncomfortable. He had never felt this way before, where he lamented the feeling of loss, and losing control of the situation. How can I save her? If I am not mistaken, my mistress helped you to dispel a curse seal before, and dispelling a curse needs my mistress' blood. So now, only you have that purest blood of light throughout the world flowing in your body, which can be then introduced into my mistress' body. Only when this spell that is freezing my mistress' body is undone, will she then be able to come awake on her own. Chapter 182. 1. You Ninny, do you want to die? Zhang Mai's voice had barely just faded and Lu Junyao had not even expressed his reply when Bai Ji Yan had already opened his mouth to refuse. That will not do. This fella here has a unique body constitution and he must never be wounded or bleed, as once he is wounded, the bleeding will not stop. When that happens, not to mention having him infuse his blood into the little lass body, he might suffer grave injuries to his very core. Hearing those words, Zhang Mai narrowed his eyes. So, you mean you do not care whether my mistress will live or die here? Of course we will have to save her, but can't we do it with another method? Bai Ji Yan asked, trying to negotiate. Where are you going to find such a completely perfect solution from? Zhang Mai scoffed. He had come to develop a certain level of dislike towards them in their hearts, as the two of them were seemingly unwilling to save her by giving all kinds of excuses. Only his mistress would be so kind-hearted for nothing. If she had known this in the beginning, she should have just let the man die. Lu Junyao looked at the young lady lying on the bed, and it was a good while before he opened his mouth to say, "What do I need to do?" "Junyao. I cannot stand back to watch something happen to her in front of me. It's just a little bit of blood. It wouldn't hurt me." Lu Junyao calmly interrupted the man. Seeing that, Bai Yen could do nothing but back down, his grumbling protests swallowed down into his belly. Every time they meet with an incident that concerns the lass, this fella would always lose his mind, saying that it would not hurt to help her. Just a bit of blood would not come to hurt a normal person much, but on you it could take away half your life. "I need to help my mistress sit up first," Zhang Mai said as he came beside the bed. His hands had not even touched the blanket when his hand was pushed away by Lu Junyao. Gazing into the golden-haired youth's look of incomprehension, Lu Junyao's face was normal as he said, "I'll do it." He then cradled his arm around the young lady's shoulders, and gently lifted her up to lean back against the bed's headboard. The young lady was dressed in just a thin white inner robe, and the wide collar had loosened while she slept, now slightly opened up, offering a glimpse of her exquisitely beautiful collarbone, and an exceptionally mesmerizing curve on her body. The man's face did not change as he helped her adjust her collar, his eyes watching her face intently to look like an elder being concerned for his junior. Zhang Mai was a little puzzled as he watched the scene before him, blinking his gold-silvery eyes, unable to help himself but feel that something was wrong, but could not really put his finger on it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. That went on until the man's low and magnetic voice sounded. "What's the next step?" Zhang Mai then snapped back to his senses and went on to reply. "Cut a slit in my mistress' palm." Hearing that, Lu Junyao lifted one of the young lady's hands and dragged the tip of his finger gently over the smooth fair skin of her palm. The next moment, a long cut wound appeared, but in that wound, not a single drop of blood flowed. It could be seen that her body had froze up quite severely in every drop of blood, and every blood vessel had lost their ability to function, becoming slow and sluggish. Chapter 182. 2. You Ninny, do you want to die? Now cut your palm and press it against my mistress' palm and use spirit power to inject your blood into her body till the wound on her palm starts to bleed. Her body would then be able to balance and heal on its own. Lu Junyao followed those instructions and did as he was told, drawing a finger over his palm where a thin line of blood immediately appeared, slowing seeping out from within. He immediately held the young lady's wrist and pressed their palms together. The next second, it felt as if there was a suction force in her palm as all his blood started to surge into the wound on her palm ferociously. In just a while Lu Junyao's face had started to turn pale. Bai Yen was watching with trepidation at the side, and he could not help but voice out to ask the youth beside him, when will he then be able to stop? Will the lass finally come to suck up all his blood? This is more terrifying than meeting a vampire. Qin Yu's skin was fair, and when the blood was being infused into her limbs and body, one could almost see the flow of the blood under the exposed smooth fair skin of her arm. Probably besides Zhang Mai and the other mysterious fella who was hidden in Qin Yu's body, no one else knew just how tyrannical and dominant the purest form of blood really was. And constantly transfusing blood without stopping like this, unless Qin Yu were to awaken quickly, Lu Junyao would definitely be sucked dry if that was allowed to continue on. Only someone with such a powerful level of cultivation would be able to withstand that, and if this was any other person, they would probably already have breathed their last. Bai Yen was an elixir cultivator, and he had naturally detected that something was not right. Seeing Lu Junyao's face turn pale from excessive loss of blood, Bai Yan's expression immediately darkened as he shifted himself to come beside the bed. Just as he was about to interrupt the process, he was suddenly thrown back by a blinding bright light. The beam of light was strong and dominant, highly powerful. But it only stopped him from moving forward and did not harm him. Bai Ji Yan gritted his teeth together and cursed, "Damn it. If this continues on any longer, he will die. You must stop them this instant." Those words were of course directed at the golden-haired youth who stood leaning with his back against the wall, his arms crossed before his chest. But the youth merely shrugged his shoulders indifferently and said, "There is nothing I can do as well. You saw that light yourself just now. You were not able to get close to them and neither can I." Seeing Bai Ji Yan's face turn an ugly shade, Zhang Mai then kind-heartedly tried to comfort the man as he said, "You need not be too worried. My mistress only needs just a tiny bit of blood and that will not cost him his life." Bai Ji Yan held down the urge to curse at the youth. "You call that a tiny bit of blood?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU groggy and in a blurry daze, Qin Yu then came to open her eyes and discovered that she was in her own dimensional space. Her entire body was immersed in the spirit spring but the water was all red and bloody. Her mind still rather muddled, she had suddenly woken up like this. What is going on? Why is there so much blood? You're finally awake, my mistress. A furry red head had appeared out of nowhere to lean in close to her, happily rubbing itself against her cheek. Qin Yu snapped back to her senses at that moment and pushed the head away from her face. That was when she saw what manner of creature it was. Chapter 182. 3. You Ninny, do you want to die? Dressed all in red, a chubby little doll with a fiery red fur on his head. What in tarnation is this? Seeing her not able to react for a long while, the little doll pursed his lips and pouted. Mistress, I am the book spirit of the Heavenly Insights of Medicine. Heavenly Insights of Medicine? Qin Yu stared, her eyes wide with surprise. Book spirits exists. Of course. I have always been cultivating inside the book, and if Mistress' body had not suddenly started to freeze and was almost unable to wake up, I would not have come out from there so suddenly like this. I had actually been planning to give Mistress a great surprise. The little doll went prattling on non-stop, his face looking rather displeased. A corner of Qin Yu's mouth twitched. That must have been really hard on you then. After she said that, she then realized that she seemed to have overlooked a serious problem. She quickly went on to ask. Why am I here? And, why is it with all this blood? She was actually immersed in a blood bath. She was no perverted old freak with strange fetishes, and the state she was in could not be any stranger no matter how you looked at it. Oh. This blood is from the violet-eyed guy. Luckily, with a devilish twist of the mind, we came up with this great solution. Mistress will only need to soak yourself in this purest blood of light for 4 hours, and you will be completely healed, and it will even raise your cultivation. Qin Yu was stunned. How long has it been? Oh. Slightly more than 2 hours, I guess. Huh. Mistress, where are you going? You cannot leave this pool before you're healed. But no matter how hard he called after his mistress, Qin Yu continued moving further away without even turning her head once, till she went rushing out from the dimensional space. Those two reckless fellas have really created one big mess. Using other people's blood so extravagantly to immerse her in a blood bath. Don't they know they might kill someone like that? Those two are really going to get it from her when she returns. The young lady had her eyes closed as she laid still and quiet on the bed. The instant she opened her eyes, a golden red flash of light glinted brightly in them, mesmerizingly attractive, indescribably beautiful. Lu Junyao's face was pale and his eyes were narrowed when he saw the young lady come awake. His violet eyes were filled with joy as he said, "You're awake. You ninny." Qin Yu admonished softly. Seeing that her palm that was pressed against his was still maniacally sucking out his blood, she immediately forcefully pulled their hands apart, and brushed her finger over the man's deep wound on his palm, closing it up instantly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Only the wound had been closed but the blood he had lost could not be replenished. At almost the same moment that Qin Yu's palm pulled away from his, the instant that the blood transfusion stopped, Lu Junyao's body wavered in weakness and started to tilt forward. He had probably found it taxing right from the start, but as Qin Yu still had not come awake, he had pushed himself to persevere, refusing to let himself fall, and now he was finally able to set his heart at ease, his entire body naturally feeling weak and depleted. With the unique constitution his body possessed, it was a miracle that he was able to maintain consciousness for so long. Qin Yu instinctively stretched her arm out to catch him by the waist, as the man fell right onto her. The excessive loss of blood had caused his body to turn cold, and she could not feel any temperature in his hands. Chapter 182. 4. You Ninny, do you want to die? When have they ever seen this man in such a weakened state before? He was looking as frail as a delicate little girl. Qin Yu was feeling both angry and anxious at the same time as she could not help but berate gently, "Are you really that foolish? If I do not wake up, you might have your blood completely drained out from you. Do you want to die?" Lu Junyao leaned against her shoulder and laughed weakly, before he replied softly, "What can I do? I cannot let anything happen to you." Qin Yu was taken aback for a moment. "Why? If you were to die, how dull would it become for me?" the man said with a laugh. Qin Yu snorted contemptuously and then brutishly stuffed something into the man's mouth. It melted instantly in the mouth and it all happened before he could even react. "What is it?" "Poison." "Heh, you're repaying my kindness by killing me?" Lu Junyao said teasingly, and then drifted off into silence. He had fallen asleep. Qin Yu laid him down on the bed gently, and her gaze then turned sharply upon the golden-haired youth who had suddenly appeared. "Little burro, would you like to explain the reason behind your actions? Don't you know that he could have died?" "So what?" Zhang Mai did not feel that he had done anything wrong. To be able to save Mistress, that should be his honor. Moreover, only his blood is able to save Mistress, and if we delay it any much longer, Mistress will have fallen into very grave danger. Qin Yu's eyes turned chilly. "So, in order to save me, you can completely disregard other people's lives? In addition to that, this person has been helping me locate my mother. He is my benefactor. Mistress, wake up already. She is not your mother." Zhang Mai was not anything like his usual obedient self, the expression on his face serious and stoic. "She is the kin of this body you are inhabiting, and not yours. Has Mistress forgotten that you are the family head of the Qing family, the top sequestered family? You seem to have become more and more indecisive, a little wishy-washy. Have you forgotten about Qing Tianlin?" Seeing the young lady's face turning to look rather depressed, Zhang Mai paused a moment before he went on to say softly, "Mistress, a thing like betrayal, going through it once is more than enough. Since time began, people who have achieved great things were able to abandon lots more, not to mention a mere person's life. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Qin Yu saw the undisguised brutal bloodlust in his eyes and her eyes turned dark. He is after all a dark artifact of devilry. Even though he has stayed with her for so many years, the evil that is his nature deep inside his bones cannot be forever concealed. If not because the two of them were contracted to each other by blood, he might not even want to submit himself to her. Humans had always been in their eyes, an existence that was insignificant and lowly, small like mere insects. And she was still human after all, so she could not make herself be that heartless and cruel as him. The atmosphere there hung heavy and silent for a long while, before the young lady's clear voice suddenly said, "You should just leave." Chapter 183. 1. Illicit designs is exactly what I have towards you. Zhang Mai was taken aback for a moment and was not able to react. "What? Do you still remember why you decided to enter into a blood bond with me back then, to become my weapon spirit?" Qin Yu asked in an emotionless voice. Although not really understanding why she would bring up such a thing, Zhang Mai still nodded his head as he replied, "I remember. I was being persecuted by people from my tribe and I was severely injured, unable to even maintain my original form. It was Mistress who saved my life back then. Qin Yu back at that time was merely about 2 to 3 years old, a tiny little tot, who clearly did not know anything at all, but possessed a rather mature mind for her age. After she picked him up and brought him back, she carefully tended to his injuries and helped him regain his cultivation powers. And that recuperation had lasted 3 long years. Snakes are born as cold-blooded creatures and it could have been because this young lady made him feel warmth and a sense of security that Zhang Mai did not leave even after he recovered, but was willing to serve as her weapon spirit, and to enter into a bond by blood, to live or to die with, never to abandon or leave her. As a weapon spirit who had been by her side since she was very young, it cannot be said that Qin Yu's relationship with him was not deep. But if she had awoken in time, even if Lu Junyao was not dead, his body would have been severely damaged, to become frail and susceptible to sickness. And she would have been the cause of that, so how could she not feel anything about what he did? Thinking about that, Qin Yu gave a sigh. Little burrow, I might have been too easy and lenient with you, but do you remember me telling you this once before? Do not touch the people around me. The expression on Zhang Mai's face was shocked. Mistress. Are you blaming me here? He really did not think that he had done anything wrong as everything that he did had been for his mistress. And now she was questioning him because of an outsider. Qin Yu did not answer his question but was gazing at him calmly. Why did you make him shed so much blood when it was something that could be solved with just a few drops of blood? Did you do that only to save me? His body is of a unique constitution and in addition to that, he drank my blood before, which made the power of his blood even stronger. So his blood will allow one to raise their cultivation and soar to reach the heavens. I suppose that is exactly what you and that thing in the heavenly insights of medicine were planning. The young lady's monotonous voice felt cold and limpid, like she was talking about an affair that had nothing to do with her at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But those words caused the look on Zhang Mai's face to sink, his fists clenching up, like he could not believe what he was hearing. Qin Yu smiled. Don't you find it strange how I know about this? Because on both that thing in the heavenly insights of medicine and on you, lingers the scent of his blood. You have probably forgotten that I am an elixir cultivator. No matter how well they tried to hide it, they were not able to escape her sharp sense of smell. As her weapon spirit, Zhang Mai was absolutely loyal to her, and she did not have to worry about him betraying her. But besides her, he could be unscrupulously cruel and savage to all other people, and the people around her would not be spared. And just for her sake, he could be capable of anything, even if that went against her wishes. Chapter 183. 2. Illicit designs is exactly what I have towards you, little burrow. Maybe the decision you made back then was too hasty. Maybe I am not suited to be your mistress, and you are not suitable for me as my weapon spirit, so making you follow me might just be tying you down, which could have you feeling rather restricted. Qin Yu's face looked the same as usual, a faint smile hanging just from the edge of her lips. You do not need to worry about a thing, as a blood bond can be rescinded and you will not suffer any backlash from it. The youth's eyes were lowered and he did not say anything for a long while. After some time passed, he then opened his mouth to say softly, You are chasing me away because of this man here. Qin Yu shook her head and laughed softly. I am not chasing you away. I am merely trying to broaden your horizons and allow you to have better choices to choose from. In the past, regardless of anything you did, I was able to choose to shut one eye to all your misdeeds as they were after all beneficial to me. I am also not some goody two-shoes. But there is one thing that little burrow you forgot. I said that you must never ever harm the people around me and you have defied my orders. Zhang Mai's fists clenched up tighter and he did not say a word, like he was holding something back. Finally unable to remain there any longer, he turned himself around and left, slamming the door shut behind him. Qin Yu's face was expressionless and she did not say anything to persuade him to stay. She had let that fella had his way with things a little too much, or how could he possibly dare to commit such a deed over her head like this today? If she doesn't take him down a peg or two, he would forever not feel any remorse or change. And you're chasing him away just like that? A man's voice questioned softly behind her, his voice a little raspy. It was probably because he had fallen asleep for a while and was still feeling a little groggy, having just woken up. Yu turned to the side and saw the man's half-opened eyes, the violet orbs tinged with faint smiles. He was looking at her intently, his handsome countenance still showing a hint of paleness, like he was ill, causing that always willful and flamboyant-looking face to seem a little frail. "Looks like my poison isn't lethal enough. To think that you will wake up so soon," Yu said with an eyebrow raised, glancing at him out of the corner of an eye. Lu Junyao placed a hand beneath his head as he laid there, the corners of his lips curved up in a mischievous smile. "You would really poison me to death? Can you really bear to do that?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, what a duplicitous little fox, her bark meaner than her bite. She had clearly fed him a blood-nourishing elixir but just insists on saying that it's poison. Yu scoffed. "Why not? You look like a fool who does not treasure his life anyway, so instead of wasting my effort to save you all the time, I'd rather just feed you poison and that will be the end of it. Die early so you can reincarnate sooner." The smile on Lu Junyao's lips stiffened. This venomous-tongued vixen. Never giving in an inch, and would never admit defeat. The atmosphere was strange and silent for a while, and Lu Junyao then came to realize where he really was at that moment. Chapter 183. 3. Illicit Designs is exactly what I have towards you. The hair of the young lady beside him was in a disheveled state as she sat hiding behind her blanket, dressed only in a thin inner robe. He, on the other hand, was similarly wearing his white inner robe and lying on the bed beside her. With the two of them huddled in such close proximity, Yu had even given him a part of the blanket, thinking that he was probably feeling cold, draping it over his abdomen. At that moment, if he were to move his body even slightly, he would inadvertently come in contact with some part of her body. In that instant, the two of them suddenly found themselves slightly stunned to be caught in such a situation. Yu regained her senses first and she started trying to explain, "Do not misunderstand. Because your body is weak as you lost too much blood, and with the temperature being so cold in the winter, if you come to catch a cold sleeping under the chill, I will have to take the trouble to save you again." Why does that explanation somehow make the awkwardness in that situation even more conspicuous? Especially when the young lady's exquisitely beautiful face was seen to be tinged with a slight bashfulness. Lu Junyao could not help smiling, thinking the way she looked could not be any more adorable, and just needed to lean in a notch closer, to say in a low magnetic voice, "What have I misunderstood?" Yu was dumbfounded for a moment as she saw the teasing look on the man's face. Her eyes turned away uncomfortably as she then choked and stuttered, "Misunderstood? That I have illicit designs towards you." The man's actions that had showed scant regard for his own safety had stirred up something deep in her heart this time, where he plunged in without thinking too much about it. But who knew that he would wake up so quickly, which put her in this situation she found herself hard-pressed to explain. Hearing that, Lu Junyao's violet eyes surged tumultuously, turning deep. He leaned in close to the young lady's ear and his voice was almost seductive as he said, "I don't mind it one bit. That you have illicit designs towards me." Yu's face froze, and she stretched her hand out to push him away on his chest, trying to put some distance between them. Her other hand then went to feel the man's forehead, and she proclaimed, "There's no fever. What's making you spout such nonsense?" Lu Junyao laughed aloud as he shook his head helplessly. "This lass here really knows how to kill the mood." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, can't be bothered with you any longer. Get out of my way. I want to get off. Yu was on the inside of the bed, and with the man who had such long arms and legs lying across the entire length, he looked to be such an eyesore. But as she was not exactly modestly dressed at that moment, she didn't think it was appropriate for her to stand up, so she stretched her leg out and kicked him. Lu Junyao howled exaggeratedly. I am now a weak and frail patient. Can you be more gentle with me? What an actor. She had just barely touched him, and he was howling so pitifully. The corner just above Qin Yu's eyebrow twitched as she stared at the man who looked like he was refusing to get off from her bed. She then said to him in a calm and composed tone, Can you excuse me please? I need to go deal with one of life's most important matters. Chapter 183. 4. Illicit designs is exactly what I have towards you. Lu Junyao was taken aback by surprise, one of life's most important matters. In simple layman terms, that would come to mean the lavatory. Qin Yu said with a smile on her face. Hearing that, Lu Junyao laughed till he almost could not breathe, and it was a long while before he calmed down. You are really a bizarre little minx. Qin Yu did not know what to say to that. Bizarre? Is he talking about her? She had been lying in that bed for almost the entire day. Isn't it entirely normal for her to need to use the lavatory? What is so surprising about that? Seeing him finally move his body, Qin Yu pouted and slowly shifted herself towards the foot of the bed. But sometimes coincidence strikes, and a corner of her loose clothes just so happened to have been caught under Lu Junyao's body. When she suddenly got up on the bed, she found herself being pulled right back down. Lu Junyao did not notice that he was sitting on her clothes, and by the time he was able to react, the young lady was already crashing down onto him. He immediately stretched his arms out to catch the tiny falling figure. Both of them were caught completely off guard, and Qin Yu's eyes widened in shock. Their lips were so close to each other that it seemed the moment either one opened their mouth, they would touch. Qin Yu subconsciously held her breath, as throughout her 2 lives, she had never been in such an intimate position with a man, so she was suddenly feeling rather flustered. After being stunned into a daze for a short moment, Lu Junyao's face then broke into a rather mischievous smile as he said, Are you trying to make good the illicit intentions you harbor onto me? Qin Yu then retorted with indignant anger. I was not. Who asked you to be sitting on my clothes? If there were really illicit intentions, it would be you who will be capable of those unclean thoughts. The arc at the corners of Lu Junyao's lips deepened, and his violet eyes narrowed, the starry sparkle within able to melt anyone's heart. This man was always smiling, fake smiles, scornful smiles, smiling in indifference, and a highly dangerous evil smile that sent chills running up one's spine. A smile filled with such immense joy that was on his face now, was rare to see. Probably only when he was with Qin Yu, would he be able to smile so earnestly and in such a relaxed manner. Looking at it from this angle, the man's gaze was tender and intent, like he was gazing upon his beloved, his eyes seeing only her and was blind to everything else. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The arms firmly circled around her waist showed no signs of wanting to loosen its grip, and her fingers that were pushing against the man's chest started to curl up, right about ready to put up a struggle. Right at that very moment, the door was suddenly pushed open, and Bai Jiyan's loud boisterous voice could be heard. How is it? Has Qin Yu woken up yet? Junyao. What are the 2 of you doing? The voice trailed off on a long note, its pitch rising in shocked astonishment. It had not been easy for Qin Yu to break herself out from the crook of the man's arm, and being shocked all of a sudden like this, her hands pushing back against his chest went weak, and she fell right smack onto the man, her lips pressing against something firm and hard, before the man's body went stiff as a board. Chapter 184. 1. The Hell Lord Awakens. That thing below her lips then moved, its touch strange and intriguing. Qin Yu recovered from her stunned daze and saw that she had actually kissed the man right on his Adam's apple. Things have become so awkward. It would be strange whether Qin Yu got up or remained down there, suddenly feeling at a complete loss like she had never been before. That fella had just teased that she was hiding insidious illicit intentions towards him, and she had now just made herself guilty of that crime. Bai Yen stood flabbergasted at the door for a long time, watching the two of them on the bed, the woman on top and the man below, locked in an intimate embrace. The young lady had even seemed to have kissed the man beneath her, her expression bashful and shy. He had merely just gone out for a short while and the two of them have already progressed to such a stage. His face looking like nothing had happened, Lu Junyao sat himself up on the bed as he held Qin Yu by her shoulders, his gaze then turning slowly to look at the wide-eyed man standing immobilized at the door. "What is it?" That was when Bai Yen then managed to recover his senses, his face looking highly complicated as he started to say, "The two of you. There is absolutely nothing between us, and what you just saw is merely an illusion." He had not even finished with his words when Qin Yu quickly interjected to say. Her body then moved to come off the bed, and stretching out a hand, her clothes at the side came flying towards her. In barely just a blink, she was already neatly and modestly dressed, well covered up. Her eyes then flashed with a glint as she looked towards the man still leaning back on the bed, trying to make herself forget all that happened just now as she then said, "Thank you for saving my life today. As you lost too much blood, have Bai Yen give you some blood-nourishing elixirs to gather your qi, and you should be fine after a few days of recuperation." Lu Junyao grunted in acknowledgement and he suddenly arched up an eyebrow. "I seem to have overheard you arguing with your weapon spirit." Qin Yu was silent for a moment before she replied, "It's nothing. He will come back on his own after sorting out his thoughts." "Was it because of me?" Lu Junyao had not forgotten that while he was just gradually beginning to regain consciousness earlier, he had heard the golden-haired youth ask her, "Because of this man, you are chasing me away? There is no need to concern yourself with this. It has nothing to do with you." Qin Yu had no intention of telling him about the matter. Little Burrow was after all her own weapon spirit and one should never air their own dirty laundry outside. As for the fact that Lu Junyao had so innocently lost so much of his blood, she would just have to find ways to help him replenish it all back in future. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It could be seen that she wasn't too willing to speak any further about it, and Lu Junyao did not probe any further. But there was one thing that she needed to know about. "Do you know why you fainted so suddenly and your body came to freeze up?" Qin Yu was taken aback a moment. "Why?" Lu Junyao massaged the bridge of his nose as he began to say, "If my guess is correct, this is due to a seal that Aunt Lon implanted inside you back then, and what happened was the result of the backlash from its power." Chapter 184. 2. The Hell Lord Awakens Seal. Qin Yu's brows creased up. "What do you mean? This brings us to the topic about your father." Lu Junyao paused, like he was not very willing to bring that up. "The tragedy that fell upon your mother was greatly because of him. He was severely injured back then and his cultivation was sealed, almost as good as dead. On his very last breaths, it was Aunt Lon who gave up her powers and the essence of her very own soul as the price to pull him back from the very brink of death." "Then, what is the other half of the story?" After hearing that, Qin Yu did not show much in the way of emotion, but as this was the first time she was hearing about her father, she could not help but feel a little curious. Another part of the reason was, as Aunt Lon was pregnant with child, and added to the fact that she was injured while also overcome with grief about the disaster that befell onto your father, she lost the will to live. Lu Junyao said softly. Qin Yu lifted her head and nodded. "Then what does that have to do with my body freezing up all of a sudden?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. There are 5 main factions of power in Cloud Heaven, and the kind of power one of the factions is highly mysterious, where nothing much is known about them by the other people of the world. They are from the barbarian tribe and their current sitting chieftain is someone by the name of Yen Shu. It is not known to many people, but the chieftain they had a few hundred years ago was a person who once rocked the entire Cloud Heaven, where no one did not know his name. The name Mo Jingyu was etched deep in the hearts of all the maidens, determined to become his wife. It was said that this man had Cloud Heaven's most handsome-looking countenance and that fame was known far and wide, seducing the hearts of countless women who could not even eat thinking about him. Despite his wanton and unrestrained ways, he was the head of the 3 lords of hell in Cloud Heaven, able to command all that power throughout the entire Cloud Heaven. It could very well be imagined just how many people were eyeing him covetously. But instead, he preferred to live uninhibited and free, and no matter how alluring power and authority was to him, it could not tie down that unfettered heart. The kind of power, position and gift in cultivation that others could only dream of was all within his reach, but he did not care for any of that. That had naturally came to incur the displeasure of the other 2, and as time passed, they started to have intentions to have him killed. Mo Jingyu was uniquely born with an icy crystalline heart, his body built different from others, hence his extraordinary gift, the speed he advances in cultivation more than 10 times faster than normal, and was immortal, where no matter how severely injured he was able to heal very quickly. Hence, that drew many people to plot and scheme, thinking that once they possessed that unique icy heart, they would possess that same great power, which would change their destiny, the world at their feet. Unaware of all that, he came to discover one day that his cultivation was slowly beginning to regress, and his body had become exceptionally frail while his heart started to freeze day by day. Suddenly overnight, his crystalline heart of ice seemed to have lost its great power. If his heart freezes up completely, there was no doubt he would die. When Aunt Lan discovered that, she took that glaciation that was overtaking his heart and diverted half of it onto you, which then came to preserve Mo Jingyu's life. Chapter 184. 3. The Dark Lord Awakens. Hearing that explanation, Qingyu had gotten a rough understanding of the whole situation. This body of hers was already afflicted by the power of the seal from birth, and from the way things look now, it could be because the power of glaciation of her unknown father's heart had been lifted, which came to trigger that 1/2 of the seal's power to activate. It seemed like this mother of hers she did not know really loved that unknown father of hers just too much, to have been so heartless towards her own flesh and blood because of the man she loved. She really did not know whether she should be moved by the kind of love they shared that was both inspiring and tragic, or to blame her mother's heartlessness. Seeing the expression on Qingyu's face looking a little helpless and forced, Lu Junyao's eyes turned sharp. You must not blame Aunt Lan too much. She had actually done everything she could to bring the damage down to its lowest level, making the choice that gives the best of both worlds, but actually hurts herself the most. Qingyu then smiled and said, I understand that. Lu Junyao saw that she did not look that greatly affected by it and then said approvingly, from the way things look, it seems like the glaciation seal in your father's body has been lifted but just has not awoken. Once he comes awake, Cloud Heaven will definitely undergo some great changes. I might need to make a trip back and I might not be able to come back here for quite a long period of time. As a person, not to mention that unforgiving and intolerant character of his, who sought vengeance for the smallest grievance, just his highly revered identity as the head of the 3 great Dark Lords was unsurprisingly enough to stir up heaven-shaking upheaval throughout Cloud Heaven, when he fell victim to an ambush in such a manner, to suffer such a great fall. But he just could not help having the feeling that this matter must have something to do with that old witch back there in the Bright Moon Temple. Hearing his tone sound particularly stern and serious, Qingyu could not help being a little worried. Then you better be careful that you do not get yourself sucked into it. Try not to get yourself mixed up into any of it. What, you're worried about me? Lu Junyao asked with a devilish smile curling up the ends of his lips, his violet eyes sparkling as he looked at her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu rolled her eyes at him and replied, don't you know the condition of your own body well enough yourself? If you accidentally get wounded, you might very well lose this other half of your life you have left. Lu Junyao's smile deepened. Since you're worried about me, why not you come with me back to Cloud Heaven? You possess Mo Jingyu's self-healing ability and is able to treat injuries for people. With you by my side, I will then not have to worry about anything. That's just wishful thinking. Qin Yu stiffened her lips and said. I have no intention of going to Cloud Heaven at this moment. With the situation set to become so chaotic there, I might get myself accidentally killed by one of the powers there before I can even meet my parents whom I've never seen before. Lu Junyao could not help but laugh and then said, feeling rather amused, with the kind of identity you possess, you can walk around in Cloud Heaven sideways if you please, as whoever that is so blind to even dare to seek your life will have Mo Jingyu coming to exterminate his entire clan. Qin Yu ignored that but suddenly looked thoughtful before she turned to gaze at him with a complicated look in her eyes. Actually, I've come to notice something for quite some time. Chapter 184. 4. The Dark Lord awakens towards this father of mine. You seem to hold some enmity against him. Why do you say that? You address my mother as Aunt Lon but call him by his name. And when I heard you mention him when you were talking earlier, the look on your face was one of contempt. Lu Junyao's eyes flashed with a glint. Does the lass have to be so sharp? But even if he had really felt contempt, he could naturally not show it, so he immediately changed the topic. I will leave Bai Ji Yen and the people in the gathered cloud here, and if there is anything you are unable to deal with yourself, just come look for Bai Ji Yen, or you can get the Lightning Blaze Unicorn to pass me a message as well. Just remember this, you must not get injured again. Upon hearing that, Qin Yu did not ask about that question she posed earlier anymore but said in rejection, that will not do. Bai Ji Yen is an elixir cultivator, and you said that Cloud Heaven will not exactly be that peaceful over the upcoming period. If you leave him here, what will you do if you get injured or fall ill? Moreover, you said you have many enemies, would you dare use another elixir cultivator out there? Most people will not be able to get close to me so easily, and neither will they be able to hurt me. He is someone I trust, and leaving him behind puts my mind at ease. Lu Junyao said, insisting on leaving the man behind. Seeing that she could not get through to him, Qin Yu was a little perplexed. Are you thinking that I will get abducted? Do I really look so useless to you? If you encounter that fake Feng Tianhen when he comes back, what are you going to do? Lu Junyao stroked her head reassuringly. Be good and just listen to me. Didn't you say that guy is special and your powers will be limited against him? If he harbors any licentious intentions or illicit designs against you, how is a little lass like you going to resist against him on your own? Illicit designs. Qin Yu subconsciously raised her head up to look at him. As expected, she saw the man looking at her with a mischievous smile on his face. Damn it! Is this fella trying to hint to her that she was just taking liberties with her? She really has to keep her distance from this guy, as she thought, or she might just fall into his trap if she was not careful. Just take him with you, as I said. I am not as weak as you think I am. Look at that skinny frame on Bai Ji Yen. In terms of medical skills, I am more skilled, and when it comes to fighting, my techniques are stronger. If you want to talk about powers in cultivation, I am definitely not at a lower level than him, so it is completely meaningless for you to leave him here. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She had probably felt pricked by those few words, and Qin Yu went on to blurt out everything that was on her mind, giving no thought to the possibility that Bai Ji Yan's fragile little heart might be hurt. Fortunately, the man had already left that place earlier, or he might really vomit out blood and die on the spot if he heard that. Seeing that she was so insistent, Lu Junyao did not want to force the issue and could do nothing but merely give a sigh. Being the young lady was even able to react, he suddenly pulled her into his arms. Promise me that you will protect yourself well. It was just a simple statement, but it felt like it encompassed many thousands of words unspoken, his tone of voice tinged with concern. Without knowing why, Qin Yu did not resist the fella's actions but merely replied with a soft voice, saying, I promise. Chapter 185. 1. The correct opening sequence for treating acrophobia. The 5-day holiday passed very quickly, and all the disciples had all come back to the Faint Mist sect. The most important event that the new year welcomed in would be the friendship meet between the three great sects. It sounded nice on the surface, but it was in reality a competition meet where the sects would fight each other in a test of strength. The Faint Mist sect had sat on the top seat among the three great sects too long, and the other two sects had wanted to take their place for a very long time. Although their top inner disciple Feng Tianhen was not around, but the third position Luo Lanji and the fifth position Su Liemo would be staying for the meet this time. With those two experts holding the fort, it would seem like there was no doubt who would be winning this year's competition. The three great sects would each select 30 of their most outstanding disciples to test their skills at the meet, and the venue for this year's competition was set at the Carefree Valley's Fleeting Cloud Fortress. That was a building that sat a good 100 feet above the ground, and it was said that it reached the clouds, where one could clearly see what it looked like in heaven, the view of swirling clouds all around indescribably breathtaking. Naturally, there was also a certain degree of danger. If one was not careful and were to fall from up there, they would definitely be smashed to pieces falling from such a height. Fleeting Cloud Fortress. That sounds rather interesting. When Mu Lai heard her teacher speak about it, she immediately rubbed her chin, her face filling up with interest. Suddenly, she arced her body towards Tan Lin Ruo. "Senior, will you be taking part?" Tan Lin Ruo's face turned a rather ugly shade as he quickly shook his head. "I'll pass, leave me out of this." "Why? Your medical skills are so good, and your powers in cultivation aren't too shabby as well. Don't you want to go out there and show off your talents a little?" Mu Lai said teasingly. Tan Lin Ruo gave her a bitter laugh. "Can Junior not make fun of me? If it was in the past, I will admit that no one in the Faint Mist sect can outdo me in medicine very readily. But now, maybe I can disregard it if it's only you, just one freakish maverick in medicine as a junior fellow disciple, but with one other unbelievable girl prodigy in the deviant department who possesses maximum level soul power in the sect. I am really greatly ashamed of myself." Mu Lai raised an eyebrow. "Putting yourself down like this, it really doesn't feel like Senior's usual style at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Tan Lin Ruo's face was looking a little constipated, like he was finding it hard to get the words out of his mouth. Only after a long while, did he then manage to squeeze out something, "Actually, I am afraid of heights." Mu Lai was taken aback. And it was only after a heartbeat that she burst out laughing, unable to believe what she just heard. "Senior, you're a full-grown man and you're afraid of heights?" Tan Lin Ruo sighed, feeling rather helpless. "I fell from a high place when I went herb picking in the mountains when I was very young, and I developed a phobia from that time onwards. You don't even need to talk about the kind of height the Fleeting Cloud Fortress sits at, which nauseates people just by looking down from there. I don't even dare to stay in a room upstairs in the inns outside." "That's serious?" Mu Lai's eyes widened in shock. "Have you never thought of overcoming your fear of heights?" "I wanted to, but nothing I did was of any use," Tan Lin Ruo said forlornly. Chapter 185. 2. The correct opening sequence for treating acrophobia. Mu Lai's finger tapped on the corner of the table and she then said, "We cannot have you being like this. Although there are many of us in the Elixir Cultivator department, how would our department look if our first disciple does not take part? We must definitely think of a way to help you overcome this weakness of yours. Do you know of any way to resolve it?" Tan Lin Ruo immediately asked, his face filled with anticipation. Mu Lai smiled. "Of course there are ways to do that." For some unknown reason, Tan Lin Ruo just could not help but shiver when he saw that smile on her face. "Ah, little Junior. Hurry up and pull me up quickly. Little Junior. Junior, I am so terrified here. I am going to die. I am really going to die. It's too high. It's really too high like this. I don't want to be treated anymore. I'll just not take part in the competition, and just having you represent the Elixir Cultivators department is good enough. Junior, do you hear me? Pull me up right now. I am really dying from fright here all. On the mountain behind the faint mist sect, winter mornings were usually crisp and quiet here, where not even the sound of birds would be heard. But on this day, a horrible demonic wailing was heard reverberating out from it. Hanging off a sheer broken cliff, from a rope that was just about a finger's width with one end tied around a tree a good distance away, and the other end of the long rope reaching over the edge, was a person. His face was deathly pale, covered in buckets of cold sweat. That person turned out to be Tan Lin Ruo. He was holding on for dear life onto the rope that encircled his waist, attempting to climb upwards. But at such a great height, he was just too terrified, not daring to make any big movements, and had no choice but to beg for help from the person above. Mu Lai was seated idly up on the cliff top, listening to the heart-rending cries, and she then said emotionlessly, "Senior, I am only doing this for your own good. From now onwards, we will dangle you over this cliff for 4 hours every day. When you get used to it over time, you will naturally be rid of your phobia. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, my dear Junior, can we change to another method already? Something a little more mild." Tan Lin Ruo's voice was trembling incessantly, and he could feel that his entire body had gone numb. His body suspended in the air was swaying to and fro under the wind rushing up from the bottom of the cliff, and the thin rope looked like it was going to snap in the middle at any moment. It was just too terrifying to watch. Mu Lai listened to the useless-sounding man's faltering voice and shook her head ruefully, thinking that he should be better than this. "Senior, what are you so worried about? Will I really want to cause you any harm?" As the respected Faint Mist Sex Elixir Cultivators Department's first disciple, Elder Jin's favorite star pupil, and you are going to give up on the chance to take part in the 3 great sex friendship meet. Do you think that Elder Jin will die from rage if he hears about this? Hearing those words from her, Tan Lin Ruo could not help feeling ashamed. But the fear in his heart was really hard to control, and he gulped as he asked, "Junior, this rope." Chapter 185. 3. The correct opening sequence for treating acrophobia. You have nothing to worry about. This rope of mine is not any ordinary rope. Don't think that it's just a thin rope. This is actually a magical artifact which is incredibly strong, one that cannot be cut even with a sword. Unless you are unlucky enough to encounter the sawtooth bugs. Before the teeth on those bugs, they can turn even the best blade on any weapon into scrap. Tan Lin Ruo's voice rose up higher in pitch. "Are sawtooth bugs completely jade green in color and round in shape, their mouths filled with sharp teeth?" "Eh? How do you know?" Mu Lai asked puzzledly, her head about to peer over the ledge as she asked. I think I can see them biting." "Ah!" Tan Lin Ruo's terror-filled voice suddenly stopped, and then turned into a high decibel screech. Mu Lai felt the rope tied to the tree turn slack, like it had snapped somewhere in the middle. Her gaze immediately constricted. "Oh no!" Immediately, the tall slender figure quickly jumped off, hurtling downwards to the bottom. She descended with great speed, one hand grabbed around the vines running down the cliff's face and the other pulling out the snake whip hanging from her hip. The whip lashed out at lightning speed, curling around the waist of the man whose face had turned white as a sheet from fright, before she pulled him up. Tan Lin Ruo almost foamed at the mouth to fall into a dead faint, and his body had just steadied itself a little when he found himself being pulled up, shocking him so badly that he wanted to scream again. The corner of Mu Lai's temple twitched as she shouted with a grunt, "Shut up!" Under the piercing stare of that pair of bright but sharp-looking eyes, Tan Lin Ruo subconsciously clamped up obediently. He then heard the woman's cold but reassuring voice ring out once more, "Lower your head and look down." Tan Lin Ruo did as he was told, and when he saw the fog-filled bottomless pit below him, he immediately turned his eyes away. "I want you to look down into the bottom for a good half-hour starting from now. If you do not comply, I will let go of my hand now and let you fall," Mu Lai said with a threatening voice. "Junior. No negotiating." Tan Lin Roa was feeling highly aggrieved, but had no choice but to comply. Why has he never noticed that this junior of his who always had a smile on her face was actually such a terrifying demoness? Such a brutal tyrant. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The seconds and minutes passed slowly in a trickle, and Tan Lin Roa was feeling rather uncomfortable hanging from the whip around his waist. He innocuously shifted his body and Mu Lai probably noticed the movement. She then tossed him a vine beside her and said, "Hold on to this on your own." Tan Lin Roa went on to grab the vine subconsciously and he then felt the whip around his waist loosen. Mu Lai had retrieved her whip and hung it back on her hip. Holding on to the coarse vines for such a long period, his palm unconsciously started to sweat. Tan Lin Roa turned to the lady beside him and said, "Junior, aren't you afraid?" "What is that to be afraid of?" Mu Lai scoffed. "If you fear heights, you are going to die here today. Will you still be scared if you think of it this way? What if you come to fall off a cliff someday and you actually have a chance to save yourself, but your life was forfeited just because of acrophobia?" Chapter 185. 4. The correct opening sequence for treating acrophobia. Tan Lin Roa fell silent as he lowered his eyes to look down at the bottom of the cliff. It seemed like the fear in his heart was not so intense anymore. It was not known how long had passed before the lady's voice sounded beside him. "Are you still so afraid of heights?" "I'm a little better now," Tan Lin Roa replied. "Then let's go up." Once her voice fell, Mu Lai hooked her arm around Tan Lin Roa's waist and with a light tap of the tip of her foot against the cliff's face, they soared up towards the cliff top. Having been obsessed only with all things medicine for more than 20 years, this was the first time that Tan Lin Roa was so intimate with a woman. His handsome face immediately turned slightly scarlet, as he kept his head lowered, not daring to look at the lady. "All right, we'll continue tomorrow. That's all for today and I'll take my leave first." Mu Lai did not notice his strange actions and she left after saying those words. "Junior." The lady's tall slender figure gradually grew smaller into the distance as she lifted a hand up to wave, but did not turn around. "She had only helped me because of the elixir cultivators department reputation, right?" Tan Lin Roa muttered softly to himself as he stared at the gradually disappearing figure. Without knowing why, his heart was suddenly feeling a little disappointed. The Carefree Valley was nestled within a vast range of mountain peaks and their headquarters sat right at the bottom of a gorge below a sheer and precipitous rocky cliff face. Because of that, even though not everyone in the Carefree Valley had high and unfathomable cultivation, all of them possessed amazing skill in light steps that allowed them to soar and leap over great heights, easily scaling up and down the cliff face that instills fear into others just by looking down from the top, traversing the sheer surface like it was flat ground. The fact that the venue of the friendship meet was set at the Carefree Valley this time, actually posed a great challenge to the people from the other two sections. For no other reason than the fact that though the Carefree Valley was last in position among the three great sects, they were definitely not weak in might. Moreover, they were well known throughout the Constellation lands for their skill in assassinations, a highly secretive organization. It was easy to imagine just how treacherously dangerous the Carefree Valley's headquarters must be, and just traversing that insurmountable cliff face alone that was filled with all manner of traps and was covered with countless species of poisonous plants was already a nightmare. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That bunch of old fogies have really wrung their brains dry to give the Faint Mist sect and the Limitless sect an initial show of intimidation. I guess everything on that cliff have all been primed and readied. Feng Chi said with a laugh as he looked at the man sipping at his tea at the table. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, as he took another light sip of the refreshing tea in his cup, but did not respond. Feng Chi was already used to the man's personality and he went over to sit down on his own accord, pouring himself a cup of tea before gulping it down. I am guessing that you are not interested in the friendship meet at all. You have always run away and gone into hiding quietly. As he spoke, the sound of fluttering was heard just outside the window, and a snow-white bird with just a golden splotch between its eyes flew in, landing itself on the table. A tiny bamboo canister was tied on one of its legs. Feng Qi's eyes widened in astonishment. What kind of a bird is this? I have never seen it before. Chapter 186. 1. It's troublesome being good-looking. The bird looked exceptionally intricate and beautiful. Its sharp beak and claws were red, the feathers on its head a fluffy plume, somewhat foolishly adorable. Seeing it, Feng Qi could not help but fell in love with it, and he reached his hand out wanting to stroke that tiny fluffy head, but it was coldly smacked away by the man seated on the opposite side of the table. He recoiled in surprise and asked, "What?" Shi Zhanchen arched up an eyebrow and his voice was melodious and soothing as he said, "This species of bird looks completely harmless and adorable on the surface, but its beak and claws contain highly lethal poison. One might still be savable if it does not draw blood, but once bleeding occurs, the poison will spread to their entire body in an instant, and there is no way of resurrecting the person." Hearing that, Feng Qi's face turned pale and he backed away from the creature. Heavens, he just had such a close brush with death. You do not need to be so worried. These birds are really very gentle, and as long as you do not try to harm it or carelessly touch its head, it will not attack you. Shi Zhanchen told him with a slight smile hanging at the ends of his lips. He stroked the bird's back with a finger and it bobbed its head contentedly, its wing brushing against the back of his hand. Watching that scene, Feng Qi then asked in bewilderment. "Why can't we touch its head?" "Because it thinks that its head looks very foolish the way it is, and it will become more stupid if it allowed humans to touch it." Feng Qi was speechless. What a peculiar bird. Shi Zhanchen removed the bamboo canister from its leg and signaled that it could leave. The bird immediately understood and it flapped its wings slightly, as if it was bidding him goodbye, before it flew itself away. Shi Zhanchen pulled out a tiny roll of silk from the bamboo canister and spread it open, to see that it was completely blank, absolutely nothing on it. He then dipped a long slender finger into his tea a couple of times, to wet the tiny piece of silk. On its clear blank surface, traces of words then started to appear. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He scanned through its contents very quickly, before he then tossed the silk cloth into the incense burner on the table and it turned into ashes in a blink. During the upcoming friendship meet, watch out for a girl with outstanding looks and is greatly skilled in medicine. Shi Zhanchen said softly. Feng Qi raised an eyebrow quizzically. What, you intend to poach people from the other two sects? Remember what I just told you. Inform me if you have any news. Shi Zhanchen tossed out those words, before he turned around and walked out from the bamboo house, to suddenly disappear right before Feng Qi's eyes in just a blink. Feng Qi shook his head and grumbled to himself, always being so mysterious. Chapter 186. 2. It's troublesome being good-looking. The doll-faced girl rolled her eyes and said, "More good-looking than you anyway." The effeminate-looking man then said contemptuously, "Love-struck idiot." Just as they were able to engage in a war of words, someone at the side suddenly said in a soft voice, "Stop quarreling already. Senior Luo's here already." The moment his voice fell, they saw the handsome-looking and gentle green-robed Luo Lanji walking in slowly, a faint smile at the edge of his lips. "Senior, are you going to remain here in the Faint Mist sect this year and not travel around the lands? Have you come to discover that you just cannot bear to leave us and have decided to stay?" The doll-faced girl said teasingly when she saw the man. Luo Lanji was the most idly content person in the Faint Mist sect who did not seek fame, never having taken part in any of friendly ranking competitions. He had never cared for such vain and empty positions, preferring to travel all across the lands to see different sights, seldom staying in one place for long. When he heard that, Luo Lanji merely laughed and turned his gaze to look at the doll-faced girl. "You seem to be very happy that I will be remaining here. Is it because you think Senior's temper is too mild and will not be able to rein in all of you? How could I possibly dare think that? Senior cuts such an imposing figure, and I respect you so much. The doll-faced girl said with her hands pressed together respectfully, her face almost obsequious looking. Everyone's faces cringed up in disgust. This little minx is really a great hand at steering along with the wind. Luo Lonji did not bother himself with her but turned to everyone else in the room to say, the three great sects' friendship meet will start in about 2 weeks' time and every sect will each be sending 30 of their disciples to take part. As our deviant department has a very small number of members, we only have 3 spots allocated to us. Who wants to go? TSK, another friendly competition. It's all so meaningless. Someone opened their mouth to say in a lazy tone of voice. Another person then chirped in right after, that's right. They always tell the contestants they must not go overboard as it's all just to promote friendship among the 3 great sects. Tui. It's all so nauseating. If it's a fight, then one must go all out. In there, maiming and killing of opponents are prohibited, how are the contestants then supposed to show their skills? Hearing all kinds of grumbling across the floor, Luo Lonji raised an eyebrow. His gaze came to rest upon the young lady seated quietly in the left side of the room, who was seemingly contemplating something. He opened his mouth to ask, Qingyu, what do you think of it? Hearing her name being called out, Qingyu quickly snapped back to her senses. About what? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, with the 3 spots the deviant department has been given, it has been decided that you are to take one, by the order of the sect leader. As for the other 2 spots, who do you think are suited to fill them? Luo Lonji asked with a smile. The moment those words were spoken, everyone's eyes immediately turned to stare intensely at Qingyu. Qingyu was taken aback by all the intensity directed right at her. Why are all of them suddenly staring at her like that? Lu Junji seemed to sense her bewilderment and he kindly opened his mouth to explain, because the friendship meet competition requires its participants to stop once the winner is determined, and prohibits anyone from intentionally injuring their opponents. But this savage bunch of people here will not be able to control themselves, unable to hold their powers back, so they are unwilling to participate. Would you happen to have a solution for this situation? Chapter 186. 3. It's troublesome being good-looking, that's such a simple thing. A smile curled up at the ends of Qingyu's lips. Whoever can defeat me in battle will not have to go. Everyone felt as if they had been struck by a bolt of lightning out of the blue. Who is she kidding? They are supposed to defeat the little maniacal monster who possesses maximum levels in both soul power and martial strength? Isn't that like at least 10 times harder than trying not to kill their opponent in the competition? Who would dare to really go challenge Qingyu? Losing to their little junior, how utterly humiliating will it be? They really wouldn't be able to endure that. In the end, the last 2 spots were given to Xing Tong and the highly vain effeminate-looking guy. Xing Tong because he wanted to remain by Qingyu's side, and the effeminate-looking man was because he possessed extraordinary defense capabilities, so he was the most ideal choice. That took up their entire morning class, and after the choices were made, everyone dispersed to go their separate ways. Only Qingyu followed behind Luo Lonji, walking off in a different direction. What? You have something to say to me? After they've walked a distance away, Luo Lonji halted in his steps, turning himself around to ask her. Qingyu was silent for a moment, and it was after quite a long while that she came to say. How long have you and Feng Tianhen known each other? Lu Lonji was rather taken aback when he heard that, like he had never expected her to ask about something like that, but he still went on to reply to her, the few of us have followed under the chief for many years, and I have known him ever since I was a young youth, so it must have been at least 10 over years already. Has his whereabouts always so unpredictable, seldom coming back here to the Faint Mist sect? That's right. Back when the Faint Mist sect underwent a regime change 10 years ago, the chief merely remained here for a short 3 days, leaving immediately after the uprising was quelled. Speaking of this, it seems like right after you came here, that was the longest period of time he had remained here in the Faint Mist sect, and everyone was saying the chief treats you very differently from everyone else. Luo Lanji said jokingly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Yu Qing Yu's eyes glinted sharply. Then. May I be bold and ask you this? In his interaction with all of you, have any of you noticed anything strange? Like. Suddenly flying into a rage for no good reason, where he is highly different from the way he usually is. The moment her voice fell, she did not miss the look of astonishment that flashed very briefly across the man's face. It seems like her guess had been correctly. Qing Tianlin had really succeeded in cultivating that evil forbidden technique, where he would be able to forcibly occupy a person's flesh body even when the person's original soul had not yet disappeared. And as he grew in strength and power over time, the original soul would become more and more frail, before it would be gradually devoured. But with this flesh shell that Qing Tianlin had picked, the soul's willpower was probably too strong and resolute, resulting in him being unable to successfully completely devour Feng Tianhen's original soul. His puppetry technique had been locked down with her sacrificial blood seal that time, and if he wants to lift the prohibition, there was only one way to do it. He would have to constantly seize the souls out of living people to increase his powers, and when the evil powers in him coalesce together to become incredibly strong, he would then be able to smash through the seal in one powerful stroke. Chapter 186. 4. It's troublesome being good-looking. Ji Qing Tianlin would definitely employ that method, and a great number of living souls would undoubtedly come to perish. In his previous life, in order to gain the position of the family head and 2 secret treasures, he had fallen into devilry by cultivating forbidden techniques, almost annihilating everyone in the clan. Blood had flowed like a river in that one night, where hundreds of innocent lives were taken just like that. Although he had still not harmed her in any way despite having lost his mind, that was only because he needed the secret treasure hidden in her body. The only thing to do now was to find him as soon as possible, otherwise she also cannot be absolved of all responsibility from the bad karma that his heinous deeds would come to accumulate, as she was the one who placed his puppetry technique locked under a seal. My lord, this is an invitation sent from the Siamese seas. Their king has gained a son in old age, and he is inviting people from the various factions of powers to celebrate this joyous occasion. A man knelt there with one knee on the ground, his hands holding a grayish-blue invitation card above his head, highly respectful and servile. Lu Junyao glanced lazily at the invitation card, and his voice was indifferent as he said, "Reject them." The black-robed subordinate was taken aback. What reason should I use to reject them? Although the Siamese seas people are merely a tiny power faction from faraway seas, it is not advisable to undermine them carelessly, as there is always the chance that we might come to cooperate with each other. The other power factions are all sending representatives out of courtesy, and if the Dark Lands respond differently from everyone else, will we end up being viewed with derision? An eyebrow on Lu Junyao's face arched up, his violet eyes bright with splendor. The Dark Lands are the very representation of evil itself. Shouldn't it be a given that we display willful arrogance by doing the very opposite of others? His voice then paused a moment as he cast his glance out of the corner of his eye, seemingly disdainful, as he then said, "Moreover, the color on the invitation card is really ugly, even the design of it is disgusting." The black-robed subordinate did not know what to say. "My lord, can you be any more reckless? Are you really rejecting the invitation just because you find the invitation card an eyesore? The color and the design used on the invitation card are representative of the Siamese seas, you know. When did you start to pay so much attention to looks? Who was it that always said what's inside a person is what truly matters? How come you have changed so much after having gone gallivanting only for a period? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But although he was filled with all these grouses deep in his belly, he still went on to obediently do as he was told, sending a reply to reject the Siamese sea's invitation. Lu Junyao leaned back in his chair, as he closed his eyes for a moment, his fair slender fingers resting lightly on the arms of the chair, the eyeless snake heads tapping lightly. Very soon, the sound of footsteps could be heard once again. Accompanying those footsteps, was the voice of a young man that sounded faintly teasing. "You've just come back not long ago and the invitations are coming in one after another, you're really so popular." Lu Junyao lifted his eyes to look and he saw Sun Luo striding in with great wide steps, an invitation card held in his hand. The purple exterior was strangely familiar, and he felt one side of his forehead twitch at his temple, an ominous premonition filling up his heart. Damn it! It's that old woman again. Chapter 187. 1. Cover up. I am serious. Seeing Lu Junyao looking as if he was about to meet with a powerful enemy, Sun Luo could not help but smile to himself as he took a few steps forward to hand the invitation card over to his lord and said, "The woman in the Bright Moon Temple has sent several invitations over before and I had to come up with a variety of excuses to dodge them all. I would think that the woman was clearly aware that you were not here in the Dark Lands during those times, and seeing this invitation being delivered so timely this time, I fear she knows that my lord has returned." Lu Junyao propped his chin up in a palm and flipped the invitation card open with his other hand to read it. The look on his face was not exactly that pretty looking. "If I may say something about this, my lord has abstained from the affairs of the heart for so many years. Though the woman might be a little advanced in age, but she is however a rare beauty. Why, my lord might as well just accept her so that she need not come try to tease and provoke you over and over again." Sun Luo's lips were split into a smile, his eyes bright with a mischievously evil glint. Although Lu Junyao was their superior, but he was a rather easygoing person with them in private, never taking offense when they teased and joked around with their lord. In normal circumstances, they did not have all that much rules to abide to between the lord and his subordinates. Upon hearing his words, Lu Junyao glanced at Sun Luo and then said with a mirthless smile, fear that if I were to really accept her, I will surely be sucked dry into a walking lifeless corpse within 2 days. You seem to have calculated your moves well. Are you scheming to assume my position and take over my power after that?" A corner below Sun Luo's mouth immediately twitched. He was just making a joke. Why has he become so serious? Moreover, all this nonsensical talk of plotting to take over the throne. Even if he really had ever thought about that, he wouldn't have the gall to do it. Tui tui tui. He had never once entertained such thoughts at all. He had always been unwaveringly loyal. Lu Junyao harumphed scoffingly and went on to ignore him. Suddenly remembering something, he then lifted his eyes and said to the man, "How did things in the White Fens lands go? Has there been any news? Speaking about this, since the time you asked him to go to the White Fens lands, it has already been close to a month's time, but we have not heard any sound or received any word at all. That is something really strange." Sun Luo arched up an eyebrow and said, "Could he have encountered something troublesome there? But I wouldn't think so. With the kind of cultivation Ling Shu has, few can match him even in cloud heaven. Unless he is really that unlucky to meet an opponent more highly skilled than him." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao curled up his lips, but did not comment. Isn't the person he wants to investigate into exactly one such troublesome guy? The barbarian tribe, ever since the flawlessly beautiful red-clothed woman sneaked into the restricted chamber, the look on their chieftain, Yan Shu's face had never looked cordial. Although he was usually a stern-faced person, but they had never seen him fly into a rage so unpredictably, like everyone owed him money. Chapter 187. 2. Cover up. I am serious. And here, Yan Shu was throwing another fit, causing the whole bunch of people to not dare to ask for instructions, afraid that they would suffer another intense round of admonishment. Forget it. I'll just die if I have to. The man outside the door drew a deep breath, before pushing the door to make his way inside. Chieftain. The man began to say carefully as he raised his head, only to see the man sitting inside to look somewhat normal, like his anger had diffused. He then said rather warily, "Chieftain, that woman in the restricted chamber told us she needs water and a new set of clothes, saying that it's for Lord Mo. She wants to help Lord Mo wash up, and change his clothes. Because of the thing that happened in the barbarian tribe many years back, most of the people had been changed out, so few people knew Mo Jingyu's identity, and all of them came to address him as Lord Mo. Yen Shu's eyes was deep and indiscernible, and it was impossible to read his mood. You came here just because he asked you to. Do you serve the barbarian tribe or do you serve that woman?" Although the chieftain's tone of voice was calm, his words spelt things out very clearly. Yen Shu was condemning the man for his actions. The man immediately fell trembling to his knees. "Chieftain, please quell your anger. It is because that woman said she is Lord Mo's wife, and that we are to obey her orders, or Lord Mo will not spare me when he awakens, so I did not dare ignore it." Almost everyone in the entire barbarian tribe knew that Yen Shu placed great importance on Mo Jingyu, making it a point to go check on him every few days, and everyone had naturally not dared dawdle on any affair that concerned the man. Hearing the man's words, Yen Shu scoffed coldly and said, "That woman is still as thick-skinned and shameless as before." He had told Mo Jingyu before, to not be tainted by that woman. In the end, not only had he not listened, he had to give up his own life for her. He had laid on that frosty ice bed for 100 years, and where had that woman been all this time, idle and carefree? She has now come knocking once again, really wonder what kind of a scheme she has up her sleeve this time. And that Mo Jingyu fella is so soft-hearted that the woman just has to whisper some sweet nothings into his ear to get the guy to throw everything down for her. With that thought in his head, Yen Shu then got up and walked out from there. He would really like to see what plot she was trying to hatch in there. In the restricted chamber, Qing Lan Fei still her fingers locked together with his in her hand, her eyes gazing quietly at him, not moving at all. 100 years has passed in a blink and he still looked exactly like he had before. Nothing has changed, it's all so great. Her slender fingers gently stroked the man's handsome face as she mumbled, "Jingyu, you can hear what I am saying, don't you? But why are you not willing to open your eyes to look at me? Are you blaming me for not listening to you back then but went on ahead to save you by harming myself?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, but, who could I watch you die away right before my eyes? Qing Lan Fei's eyes grew red-rimmed, holding back the mistiness that was forming over them, her flawlessly beautiful face tinged with a hint of sorrow. "Look. I am here perfectly well in front of you, so can you hurry up and wake up as well?" The doors of the forbidden chamber were pushed open once again and Qing Lan Fei's eyes narrowed slightly as she kept away her emotions, turning into the woman who wore a gentle smile on her face like always. Chapter 187. 3. Cover up, I am serious. Yen Shu looked indifferently at the woman beside the ice bed and then said softly, "He has laid there for 100 years. Not to mention whether he will miraculously wake up, but as his body had taken too heavy a toll back then, it is highly possible his meridians have been forever maimed. Now, besides that good-looking face of his, there is nothing he has left that is worth for you to seek from him." Qing Lan Fei looked at him with a faint smile. "What are you trying to say? All the time that you were with him, it had always been filled with so much danger. For hundreds of years, he who had never once been injured suffered more than enough of it because of you. What else do you want from him? Are you still going to keep him entangled with you and not let him off?" Yen Shu said in a stone-cold tone. "Between me and him, entangled is word that would never ever be mentioned, but caught together in love, life's happiness that is worth fighting for." Qing Lan Fei was not angry, but continued on to say, "Although I do not know why you feel so much enmity towards me, but I will never leave him. I will keep watching him here, waiting till he regains consciousness. This is what I promised him." Hearing her highly resolute words, Yen Shu became a little agitated. You woman, you really think that I am unable to do anything to you? You. Actually, sometimes I hate myself for being unable to take Jing Yu's place, wishing that the person lying here is me instead. Qin Lan Fei said with a bitter smile, and then suddenly covering her face with her hands, her voice becoming choked up. His life is really so precious, that even with the sacrifice of both me and our 2 children, he still has to suffer so much. What? What do you mean? Yen Shu asked, a little surprised. What did she mean by sacrificing both her and their 2 children? I was already pregnant with child back then, and it was a pair of dragon phoenix twins. Every time Qin Yu spoke about this, she would be in incredible pain, and her heart would wrench up in sorrow. When I executed a forbidden technique to save Jingyu, the children I was carrying were affected, and they fell into a dimensional space through time where I lost any link I had with them. My core essence was gravely damaged and my spirit soul was detached from my body, never to join again. How? Yen Shu immediately sent out his mental consciousness to probe the woman, and he came to discover that her spirit soul was deficient and incomplete, a whole lot weaker now than she was before. His heart immediately quaked from what he found out. This woman had actually used her own flesh and blood children to pay the price. To what kind of an extent does a woman have to love a man before she would be willing to unhesitantly give up everything? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU At that moment, he finally let go of all the prejudices he held against the woman. Since she was willing to do that for Jing Yu's sake, what else could he possibly say? If he continued to stop them from being together, he would be inhuman. Yen Shu shook his head and sighed, but did not say anything as he went walking slowly out of the chamber. Forget it. I am not going to interfere with those 2 people's affairs anymore. Chapter 187. 4. Cover up. I am serious. In a blink of an eye, the day of the 3 great sects' friendship meet arrived. The way Mu Lai forcefully helped Tan Lin Roa overcome his acrophobia turned out to be highly effective, and he was doing a lot better with dealing with heights, able to participate as one of the Elixir Cultivators Department's representatives. For the spots allocated to the Soul Cultivators Department, the sibling pair Ming Jing and Ming Yi took a spot each, while Qin Bei took another, with the remaining 2 spots left given to 1 male and 1 female disciple who possessed high levels of cultivation. The Elixir Cultivators Department and the Martial Arts Department were each given 10 spots, and for these 2 departments who each had over 100 members, it was enough for their disciples to fight intensely for gain a place. The friendship meet would go on for a total of 3 days, and so the disciples had to pack some clothes to bring along with them. As Qin Yu had her own personal dimensional space following her at all times, and that it was always filled with all kinds of necessities, there wasn't much else she needed to pack. Finding herself having some free time without much to do, she went over to where Qin Bei was staying to take a look. Speaking of this, it had been 2 months since they came to the Faint Mist sect, but as they were both in different departments, Qin Yu and Qin Bei seldom met each other. Except for people who were familiar with them, almost no one even knew that those 2 were siblings, and it could be imagined what a low profile both of them kept. But as it had been quite a long time since she came to the place, just as she was passing the Soul Cultivators Department's classroom, she overheard a few people chatting. She had originally not wanted to mind other people's business, but as she came to hear a familiar name being mentioned, she suddenly paused in her steps. Really wonder what kind of background the kid Qin Bei holds behind him. Elder Yen likes him, and Ming Jing takes extra good care of him, and had even given him the chance to take part in the friendship meet. What right does an ignorant little kid like him who just joined us so recently have to enjoy such a prestigious honor? I think, he must be related in some way to some big shot in the sect, and special arrangements were made for him to join us. What else can it be? Humph. He thinks he is really somebody, enjoying the backing of the teachers in our first senior, so he can be so arrogant. A new recruit who looks down on others, disrespecting his other seniors, we really must teach him a good lesson. I'll say that all of you had better not carry things too far. Although that fella is a little cold and aloof, but he at least has a very handsome-looking face. You must remember not to damage that beautiful face, I tell you. This came from a girl's giggly voice, her words holding some deeper meaning. It was another guy who took over the mic next. What? You're interested in him as well? That kid has such soft and tender skin, he looks better than many of our female disciples here. Ha ha ha. Bam! The half-closed door was suddenly kicked wide open, smashing into the wall with a loud crash, giving everyone inside a frightful shock. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, who is that? You're courting death. Someone shouted. A slender-figured young lady stood outside the door, dressed in the sex white cloud-patterned uniform, her complexion fair and smooth, her countenance exquisitely alluring, like a seductive demoness wearing a faint smile that did not reach her eyes. Someone immediately noticed that the uniform the young lady was wearing was different from theirs, and could not help but cried out in surprise, "She's from the deviant department." Chapter 188. 1. Drawn into some big trouble. The deviant department was known to everyone in the Faint Mist sect, having heard that they only had slightly more than 10 members. But every single one of them held extremely rare professions, and it was because of that uniqueness that gave all their people a certain arrogant air, people who were hard to deal with, so no one dared to carelessly offend any one of their members. The people from the deviant department were very rarely seen moving around the rest of them, so why had one suddenly come to their soul cultivators department today? Moreover, the visitor did not seem like she came here with friendly intentions. A rather good-looking young man walked forward with a smile on his face. I wonder what drove our little junior to come visit the soul cultivators department today. Did you come here to look for our first senior? As the Soul Cultivators Department's greatest prodigy, and also sixth in rank among the inner disciples, although Ming Jing had a rather cold personality, he was extremely good-looking. Hence many female disciples often came to the Soul Cultivators Department trying to get closer to him, or to just get a glimpse of the man. So, towards the sudden appearance of this beautiful young lady, every one of them assumed that she was just another girl who admired Ming Jing. Qin Yu glanced disdainfully at the man smiling earnestly at her, her tone scathing, "Who are you calling junior?" Her words were not at all friendly, which caused the man's smile to freeze on his face. But he did not get angry. Who asked the young lady to be from the deviant department, who must not be offended? Hence, he went on to ask politely, that what could our young miss here want from our soul cultivators department? Qin Yu laughed scoffingly and swept the man blocking her way to the side with a swipe of her hand. It looked like it was just a gentle flick of her sleeve, but it caused the man to crash into a table at the side, coincidentally hitting himself on a sharp corner of the table. He immediately let out a painful howl, and his hip must be bruised black and blue. Having suffered such unreasonable treatment at her hands, the man could no longer be bothered to be polite, but went ahead to berate in a loud voice, "Slut! Are you seeking your own death?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, whether I am seeking death, isn't something you need to be curious about. But one thing you should know, is that you will be dying very soon. The slender figure suddenly appeared right before the man in a flash, and a hand grabbed the collar of the man who was still cursing incessantly. It was clear to see that she was just a frail-looking young lady, but with just one hand, she lifted the man off the ground, his feet dangling off the ground. Suspended in midair, the man did not stop struggling, the clothes strangling him around his neck tightly, making it hard for him to breathe as his good-looking face turned into a shade like the color of pig's liver. The people who were all prepared to sit back and watch the show suddenly leapt to their feet, when it was obvious to see that the young lady had come here to find trouble. Moreover, she looked like a decorative vase on the surface, but the kind of power and temper she was exhibiting right before them was nothing like any kind of vase. "Miss, is there any kind of misunderstanding between us? Can you release him first? Let's us discuss this calmly." A pretty-looking woman with a melodious voice came forward trying to smooth out the situation. Chapter 188. 2. Drawn into some big trouble. Qin Yu remembered this voice. It was the only female voice among those people who were talking about Qin Bei earlier. She had not thought that the Soul Cultivators Department were all just a bunch of vile and repulsive people, and she wondered how much they had already tried to hinder little Bei before this in secret. She had initially thought that she just wanted Ming Jing and Ming Yi to keep a lookout for him, but never had she expected that it would become a source of jealousy for these bunch of people. Qin Yu swept her gaze over the inside of the house, and did not see any familiar figures she was able to recognize. Remembering the things these people had just been talking about, she then creased up her brows as she asked, "Where is Qin Bei?" Everyone then came to realize that she had not come here because of Ming Jing, but to look for the youth that all of them had found an eyesore. The moment they all recalled what they had done before, the few of them immediately shushed up. Seeing no one answer her, Qin Yu tightened the grip of her hand slightly, as she stared coldly at the man who was unable to breathe. "Since none of them are going to tell me, then I have no choice but to take it out on you." Seeing that the young lady's hand was going to snap his neck off, the man was so frightened he started to tremble violently, struggling to cry out, "Don't kill me. Don't kill me. I'll tell you. Late last night, we threw that kid in the forbidden grounds, the poison forest. But we only wanted to scare him a little, so that he will give out his spot to participate in the friendship meet. We had never ever thought that we would be unable to find him after searching throughout the entire outer perimeter. The poisonous bugs and ferocious beasts in there could very possibly have." He had not even managed to finish what he had to say before he found himself being violently thrown out, crashing hard into a whole row of tables and toppling them all, almost smashing the tables into the others standing at the back. When he crashed heavily onto the ground, the man immediately vomited out a large mouthful of blood, a wretched and pitiful sight. The young lady's flawlessly beautiful countenance was at that moment looking frighteningly dark and grave. "All of you had better pray that he is unharmed. Otherwise, from today onwards, the Soul Cultivators Department would be struck off from the Faint Mist Sex Register. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." EU. Upon saying that, Qin Yu turned around and disappeared very quickly. She needs to find little Bei as quickly as possible. That fella is most terrified of things like rodents and bugs like these since he was very young, because that old witch Mo Han Yen once locked him up together with many of such disgusting creatures for 3 whole days back when he was just a very young boy. Those things had crawled and squirmed over his entire body, gnawing upon his flesh and fed on his blood. Ever since that time, he was absolutely terrified of these hateful creatures, even frightened by the little Snow who was such a handsome-looking 1,000-year ice toad, only coming to be able to accept it after a very long time. Waiting until after she had left, everyone then started to panic. What should we do? If that kid Qin Bei really dies, she will definitely come back to exact revenge upon all of us. Why are you so afraid? No matter how strong the people from the Deviant Department are, do you think they have the right to obliterate the entire Soul Cultivators Department? Don't forget that our first senior Ming Jing is most protective of us. Whoever dares to come bully us, our first senior will never let them off. Chapter 188. 3. Drawn into some big trouble, but we did her wrong first after all. First Senior has said it before, that he would not allow any internal strife among ourselves, but we. If you don't tell and we all keep mum, who would know? That kid could very well have run out from here by himself because he wanted to seek some fun, and did not come back. Because the Faint Mist Sex Forbidden Grounds was too dangerous, they had someone guarding the place 24 hours a day, just to prevent the more curious disciples from sneaking inside, and losing their own lives for nothing. Those guys must have given it a lot of thought to be able to bring Qin Bei into the place. The change of guard at the Forbidden Grounds only took an incense stick's time to complete, and if they did not accurately grasp the timing, there was a high chance that they would come to be discovered. Qin Yu had only managed to get inside due to her incredibly sharp instincts, but she was rather lucky to accidentally spring a trap. The cold arrow that was coated with lethal poison swept right towards her like torrential rain, and if she were to be struck, it was guaranteed that she would be turned into a hedgehog. Such a big commotion had naturally alerted the guards, and when they saw the person who was trapped inside was actually just a very young lady with an exquisite countenance, they were all overcome with shock. How could that little lass even dare to sneak her way in there? And she had even sprung a trap. Enough talking already. Think of a way quick to go save her. Go shut down the traps, and hurry. It's already too late. Just as all of them were filled with horror, they saw the young lady trapped in the middle suddenly close her eyes instead. Her slender body then nimbly avoided the entire bunch of merciless arrows, so much more skilled than anyone who had snuck into these forbidden grounds with their eyes wide open. Not a single arrow even touched her, not even her clothes. Her arms were crossed before her, which held the arrows suspended in mid-air, and she then sent them all flying outwards with a strike, the merciless arrows stuck in the trees and grass all around. Without a single scratch on her. Where had this little freak come from? She looks to be at her most prime age of 16 at most, and she could actually possess such great skills. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After the initial shock passed, the few of them then slowly came out from hiding. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Qingyu opened her eyes, to see 3 people standing before her. One had a head filled with silver hair, an old man with a highly wrinkled face, the second one man about 30 to 40 years old, and the last one was a youth only in his teens, seemingly younger than Qingyu herself. These 3 strange men caused Qingyu to be unable to help herself but narrow her eyes. Young lass, which department are you from? Some great skills you've got. The youngest youth among them had a rather likable-looking dull face, and he was looking at her with smiley eyes curved into 2 crescent arcs. A corner of Qingyu's mouth below her lips twitched. This fella looks only to be about that same age as Xing Tong, and he was calling her a young lass. Chapter 188. For, drawn into some big trouble, the old man's eyes were smiling as well, looking highly benevolent. Little child, this isn't a place for you to come play in. Hurry up and go back to where you're supposed to be. The younger man's face was instead like the cold hard surface of a coffin lid, expressionless as he said, "You're just lucky you're not dead." No one who had snuck their way into these forbidden grounds had ever survived. Qingyu was speechless. Why do these 3 people seem so strange no matter how you look at them? Gentlemen, it isn't really my intention to intrude into these forbidden grounds here today, but it's because one of my kin was tricked and was brought in there, so I need to go inside to save him. I would like to request that you allow me to do so. Qingyu clasped her hands before her, explaining in a humble tone. Oh. Is that the truth? The old man stroked his beard, as he lowered his head to look at the young youth. Did you nod off while you were on watch last night? The youth's eyes widened. How can that be? I did not take a single step away from the place at all. But I was feeling a little hungry last night and a pheasant suddenly came flying out. So I caught it and roasted it to eat, which did not take me more than half an hour all in all. The old man immediately realized that the youth had been tricked and had left an opening. He glared at the youth and muttered, "All you know is only to eat." The youth looked highly aggrieved. What was so wrong in eating some pheasant meat? After the old man admonished the youth, he then turned back around and said with an amiable smile, "Little lass, there are rules here at the Forbidden Grounds and it is natural that not just anybody would be allowed in there so easily. Ever since the Faint Mist sect was founded, many highly skilled experts have lost their lives because of their curiosity about the secrets within these forbidden grounds. Are you sure you want to go in there?" Qingyu gave a soft laugh. "I must definitely go inside. Since that is the case, then let this old man wish you the best of luck." The old man smiled and slowly moved aside, from the entrance into the forbidden grounds. "Thank you," Qingyu said with a nod. Just before she stepped inside, she suddenly halted in her steps and turned around to look at the old man. How would these forbidden grounds in the faint mist sect compare to the demon beast's lair in the White Fen lands? Hearing that, the old man was taken aback a moment, like he would never have expected the young lady to ask such a question. But he still replied honestly, naturally the demon beast's lair will be much more treacherously dangerous. That is a higher level continent than the constellation lands after all. Qin Yu understood, and she curved up her lips to say, then there is nothing to worry about. After saying that, she then went walking inside without even turning her head back. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Back then, she was accidentally thrown into the White Fen lands and she roiled in those lands for half a year at least. Just at the demon beast's lair alone, she had remained there for about 3 months, and she had been only about 10 years old or so at that time. It seemed like there was really nothing she should fear here in the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds, but she was only worried about whether little Bei had been frightened out of his wits from being left alone in such a place. On the other side, after Qin Yu went into the forbidden grounds, the Soul Cultivators Department had secretly informed the sect leader Wen Renqian that a brazen and audacious disciple from the Deviant Department had come to create trouble in the Soul Cultivators Department and had snuck inside the sect's forbidden grounds. Coincidentally, Su Liemo and Luo Lanji were also present, discussing with Wen Renqian about the friendship meet that would happen the day after tomorrow. Upon hearing the person making the report, Su Liemo raised an eyebrow, seemingly amused. A female disciple from the Deviant Department? Chapter 189. 1. Poor nauseated and retching little Bei Su Liemo had merely asked casually, thinking which one of those rascals in the Deviant Department had been feeling too idle recently and was coming out to make fun of the other departments. But the messenger then replied, she injured one of our fellow disciples the moment she appeared and then even went on to barge her way into the forbidden grounds. This time, even Wen Renqian could not help himself but ask, why does that female disciple look like? Very beautiful, looking like a seductive demoness, and she said that she came to look for our Soul Cultivators Department's Qin Bei. The moment those words came out of his mouth, though Wen Renqian had no knowledge, but Su Liemo immediately reacted. He knew that kid Qin Bei, and the female who was often with him could only be Qin Yu. He's in trouble. The chief had told him to take good care of Qin Yu. How could that last do something so wild as to trespass into the forbidden grounds? He had been thinking who could have been so ignorant to utterly disregard the sect rules and commit such an audacious travesty, never expecting that it would turn out to be her. Su Liemo's good-looking face turned grave. Did any of you do something to Qin Bei? The lass did not seem like someone who would go provoke others for nothing. After so long since she came here, anyone would be able to see that from the low profile she had tried to keep. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Once those words came out from his mouth, the messenger first hemmed and hawed for a while, before he then came to realize the severity of the situation. Not daring to continue to hide the truth, he then said stutteringly, last night, we forcibly fed Qin Bei with soft bones powder, and dumped him in the poison forest. Before the man could even finish his words, Su Liemo could not help himself but to lash out with a kick, which sent the man flying over a far distance. He then roared in rage, all of you are really capable, aren't you? And a damned inner disciple at that even. You have brought shame upon all the past generations of the faint mist sect's leaders. To think that you would use such low and despicable methods on a fellow disciple. If you're that capable, why not go out there and use it on the other sects? Maybe then, the faint mist sect would be the reigning power throughout the entire constellation lands already. Being so thoroughly berated, the man did not dare to say a single word. But Su Liemo was not appeased, pointing his finger at the pale-faced man on the ground as he said, the moment all of you dumped a completely defenseless person who was fed with soft bones powder, that is no longer a damned prank, but an attempt to murder him. How could every single one of you be so mercilessly vicious? Do you know who you have offended? She is an all-element prodigy that Feng Tianhen was able to recruit after so much effort. If she becomes angry and is driven to go join the Limitless sect or the Carefree Valley, you will become the scourge of the Faint Mist sect. Finally finished with his admonishment, Su Liemo took a deep breath and turned around to say, we'll have to put the discussion about the friendly meat aside for now, as nothing can happen to Chinyu. They must be found before the friendly meat starts the day after tomorrow. Chapter 189. 2. Poor nauseated and retching little Bei Wen Renqian was silent for a while before he slowly opened his mouth to say, just what kind of an identity does this young lady hold that it has gotten you so riled up? Since they are Feng Tianhen's men, they must have received instructions from Feng Tianhen. But he just could not comprehend why a fella as mysterious and unfathomable as Feng Tianhen could possibly mix himself with that prodigious young lady who had suddenly popped out from nowhere. Towards Wen Renqian's puzzlement, Luo Lonji laughed softly and replied, actually I am just as curious as the sect leader is. What kind of an identity does the young lady really hold? Why is such great importance placed upon her? The chief's very words were, at no matter what cost, her safety is to be ensured, and if she was harmed in the slightest, we will have to answer directly to him. Wen Renqian could not help but be taken aback. Su Liemo and the others had already followed Feng Tianhen for more than 10 years, so the relationship between them and their chief naturally went without saying. But the fact that higher importance was placed upon the young lady lives over all the others, that was something rather shocking to know. After Chinyu went into the forbidden grounds, her mind went completely blank for an instant. Had she rushed in too hastily and forgotten something? This poison forest. How did all of it even come about? She should have asked those 3 people about it just now. Just as she was still feeling rueful, she felt a weight on her shoulders. She felt a furry touch on her cheek and then heard the coy puerile voice sounding beside her ear. Mother, the cry had its last note dragged out sweetly, highly titillating, almost melting one's heart. Chinyu turned to look at the little ball of coal upon her shoulders, its large deep blue eyes staring adorably at her. She could not help but smile and said in a gentle voice, Meatball, why have you come out? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The tiny animal stretched its soft fleshy paw to touch her cheek, not replying to her question immediately. It was a moment later that it then said in a soft voice, since that disobedient little golden snake has run away from home, mother must be feeling lonely. But Meatball will keep mother company instead. Hearing that, Chinyu could not help but feel her heart soften, and she carried the little ball of coal up into her arms to stroke its tiny little head. He is merely throwing a tantrum and has not straightened out his thoughts. He has not run away from home but will come back once he had thought things through. Meatball is really so sensible. Mother has not doted on you in vain. The little beast's eyes grew misty, filling up with joy, and it looked slightly abashed. Meatball is mother's most obedient baby. When this little fellow was being obedient, it was so heart-meltingly adorable one could die from sweetness. Even Chinyu could not resist being taken in by its cuteness as she carried it up to give it one long big kiss till the little animal became so shy that it hid itself inside one of her sleeves and refused to come out. Her depressed mood evaporated into thin air. Chinyu then surveyed her surroundings. Bush and shrubbery grew so thickly all around that she could not see any paths. Moreover, she had completely lost her bearings when she came in, unable to ascertain which direction she should take. Chapter 189. 3. Poor nauseated and retching little Bei. Mother, where do you want to go? Meatball can lead the way for mother. A tiny cold black head popped out from her sleeve, its voice tender and gushing. Chinyu's eyes immediately lit up. How could she have forgotten? Hadn't she first found little Meatball in Hell's Valley back then? The place that had been like one big maze? She was unable to find her way back to regather with little Bei and the others back then, and she had only managed to do that with this little fella leading the way. From that, it could be seen that the little one must be really skilled in tracking. Yu hugged the little beast and put it through another round of violation, causing the little fella to become slightly dizzy. She then said comfortingly, Meatball is really Mother's little lucky star. Your uncle's life depends entirely on you here and you've got a very important mission ahead of you. Meatball blinked its large eyes and it nodded innocently. Meatball will do its best to help Mother find Uncle. Ugh. Although it did not really like that uncle who was always pestering it to play with him, but seeing that he was always secretly sneaking food to feed it, it will help him this time. The little rotund body then hopped out from Yu's sleeve and went on ahead to find its way. Its tiny little nose sniffed around on the ground, looking like it knew what it was doing, and Yu could not help but raise an eyebrow as she smiled, before she said in amusement, Meatball, why are you being like a dog? Do you seek a person out with your nose as well? If this was in the past, the little fella would surely have thrown an unrelenting fit. But it did not kick up a fuss this time but just remained silent for a moment before it said in a soft voice, Mother, there's traces of Uncle's scent in the soil, the thick stench of blood. The smile at the corners of Yu's lips froze. Is it little Bay's blood? The young lady who had a faint warm smile on her lips had suddenly become terrifyingly solemn in an instant. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Meatball quickly opened its mouth to explain, Mother does not have to worry. It does not seem to be Uncle's blood, but the blood of some demon beasts and other humans. It looks like a massacre was carried out here recently and many people died here. Yu's brows knitted up. These are the Faint Mist Sect's forbidden grounds. How is it possible that there are other people in here? And from what you said, it sounds like there was quite a great number of people as well. Although those 3 people outside are a little strange and eccentric, but their auras are all completely concealed, clearly highly skilled experts with just one look and not anything those pompous and self-aggrandizing inner disciples in the Faint Mist Sect could compare to. What kind of people will be able to make their way past those 3 guards outside? The little fella had a special ability and it wasn't that Yu did not believe it, but just found it to be rather incredulous. Meatball crinkled up its tiny nose and said in a puerile voice, Mother, no matter how highly skilled those people outside are, what if they were completely unaware that someone had managed to make their way in? Are you saying that the people who came in had higher levels of cultivation than those 3 strange men? Chapter 189. For poor nauseated and retching little Bay, I don't know if Mother knows that there is a secret technique, where after one studies it, would then be able to conceal their physical form and the presence of their aura. You will not be able to sense anything even if that person walks past right in front of you. But the technique has a weakness, and that is one must not get wounded and bleed, or the technique would lose its effects. Someone within this group of people must have been wounded and they were all exposed, which caused them to be surrounded and attacked by the demon beasts in here. Meatball said in explanation. Yu felt a corner of her eyelid start to twitch and she was feeling rather uneasy. She could not help herself but to raise a hand up to massage her temple, before she said, I do not care whether these people are alive or dead. I just want to know where little Bay is, and whether he is still safe and alive. Meatball blinked its large eyes and looked at her feeling a little confused. Mother, what I am telling you is about Uncle. Uncle is fine, but he is currently with the people who are being pursued by the demon beasts, and they are not in a great situation. That feeling of unease was true. Little Bay must have been innocently dragged into it. Ascertain the direction he is in and bring me to him quickly. Yu immediately urged the little beast. It was wondered whether it was because the 3 great sects' friendship meet was just about to start that this bunch of people came to intrude into the Faint Mist Sect's forbidden grounds, and if so, what their intentions were. But one thing was certain, and that was the forbidden grounds were definitely hiding some kind of a secret. Hearing that, Meatball nodded and replied, Right away, Mother. Right on the other end of the forbidden grounds, Bay was being carried like a gunny sack, slung over the body of a man who was burly as an ox. The man was at that moment scurrying in a sprint, which tossed and churned everything in his stomach all over the place. But as it had been a whole day since he last ate anything, there was nothing for him to vomit no matter how nauseated he felt. His handsome face was frighteningly pale, his voice weak as he cried, Big brother, can you just put me down? I swear that I will not run away, as it is really torturous for me when I am carried by you. Shut up. Shoot off your mouth and I'll toss you to the demon beasts to be dessert. The burly man's footsteps did not stop, but just threw him an unfriendly reply. Qing Bei shut his mouth up and kept silent. Since the man can't be reasoned with, he might as well save his breath. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He swept a measuring gaze over the 10 men around him who were moving together in a group, and he started contemplating. Who could these people be? To be able to sneak into the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds without being detected, and when the scene where he saw them battle the demon beasts, had been really shocking to witness. As many as hundreds of those demon beasts had lunged maniacally at them in attack, and these men numbered only about 30 at most. Even after such an intense battle to the death, their people had managed to annihilate all the demon beasts. They still had more than 10 of them left now, without the slightest scratch on them, which shows how freakishly powerful they really were. And Qing Bei could not help but become curious, what kind of an objective could a bunch of powerful non-humans possibly have in coming here? Are you looking for something? Chapter 190. 1. Seeing the king of assassins again, who would have thought that his words had just come out of his mouth when his body jolted violently. The man negotiated his way over a concealed trap which had very nearly sent him flying. The man's deep and severe voice was then heard after that. Do not ask about what shouldn't be asked. Shut up if you want to live. Qing Bei clamped his mouth shut. What a foul temper he has. Looks like there isn't any way to communicate with him. If it wasn't because the soft bones powder in his body had not been completely purged, he wouldn't be willing to suffer like this, the nausea hitting him so badly that he felt as if his entire body was going to fall apart. But, those fellas had really dared to hatch such an insidious plot against him this time. When he gets out from here, he will definitely thrash them up so hard they will be crying for their mothers. Do they really think he is so easily bullied? Just as Qing Bei was thinking how he was going to exact revenge when he gets out, the man carrying him suddenly stopped in his tracks, and the others traveling with him had all stopped as well. He immediately raised his head up in puzzlement. What happened? That one look caused his eyes to widen as he stared. Although he had never come into the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds before, but because of his unique ability, he wasn't too panicked when he was ambushed and dumped in this place, as the highly treacherous terrain and the hidden dangers were already something he had already foreseen. Right before them, should be a wide swath of land covered with well-concealed bogs. If one did not have preemptive knowledge of the terrain and their location, even highly leveled powerful cultivators might unsuspectingly fall victim to them. The area the bogs covered was vast, and there was nothing in the surroundings one could use to cross over. Even a single feather falling on top would sink, its surface unable to support any weight at all. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. And a poisonous vapor hung above the bogs, colorless and odorless. When breathed into a person's body, the person would die from the poison in just a cup of tea's time, so crossing over was as difficult as ascending into heaven. Within the forbidden grounds, only one thing was able to safely cross over these bogs, and that was the sting butterfly of deceased souls. Just like its name, it was a creature that was a symbol of death, appearing only in places where lives were fading or where death hung heavily. These deadly bogs, which could very well be called a land of death, with the countless corpses and the stench of death buried deep below, making it a most suitable nest for the sting butterfly of deceased souls to survive and proliferate. The sting butterfly of deceased souls was jet black throughout, except for a plume of dark scarlet pattern on its wings. And at that moment, over the seemingly endless bogland that stretched as far as the eye could see, were corpses of the sting butterflies of deceased souls that completely covered the land, where tens of thousands would not even come close to describing the number they saw. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.